I'd like to call to order the Clive City Council meeting for January 27th, 2022. Would the clerk please call roll?
Mayor Edwards,
Here.
council members Klein,
Here.
McCoy,
Here.
Judkins,
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Very good. If you all would rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have our approval of our agenda. I know of no changes.
For approval.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. Next, we have our citizen presentation. This is the point in the agenda when someone can approach the council on any item that is not on the agenda. And let me just read the pillars of character that we support here in Clive. We endeavor at all times to promote and model the principles of trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. In conducting our work, we expect that all participants will act in a respectful manner consistent with these principles. Do we have anyone in the chamber this evening who would like to address the council on a matter that is not on the agenda? And Pete, do we have anyone waiting to come in to do so?
Thank you, Your Honor. For those who are participating online, if you're joining the video conference, you can use the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen. When you click on that, you will see raise hand as an option. That's one way to get my attention. You can also chat at Pete DeCook using the chat function. And for those on phone, if you would like to raise your hand, you can do so by pressing *9 and then *6 to unmute yourself. One moment, Your Honor. This time I do not see anybody raising their hand.
All right, we'll move to the consent items.
Approval.
We have a motion?
Second.
Second by Susan. Thank you. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? Consent items are approved by a vote of 4-0. Next, we have some introductions. It's a great time for the city of Clive to meet some of our new employees. And Richard, I believe you're first.
Thank you. Tonight, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing two members of the Leisure Services team. The first one is Jacob Button. He actually has been with us since mid-December. His first week was the December derecho, so he got into it right away and got to figure the city out real quick. But we're excited to have him. He hails from central Minnesota and previously worked at a golf course up there. So a little bit different change of pace for him here, and he'll come up after I'm done talking. And the second one is Austin Tasler. He's our new aquatics coordinator. He started just after the first of the year. He's no stranger to the city of Clive. He actually worked as a lifeguard and a pool manager here when he was in high school and college. So we're very excited to welcome him back. He previously was just at the city of Des Moines doing the same position there for their pools. And one last thing I'd like to say is he was just announced this week as a member of the 30 under 30 class of the National Recreation and Parks Association professionals. So a great honor for the work that he did there at the city of Des Moines to keep their pools open during the pandemic. So with that, I'll just have Jacob come up and then Austin after that.
Thank you, Richard.
Hello, my name is Jacob. Moved down here in December, started work. My family, my wife, and my 2-year-old moved down, and we're just kind of getting settled and getting thrown into the thick of things of finding a place to live. And so you got that going on. But I'm actually originally from I'm actually from a town called Conrad, Iowa, in north of Marshalltown. And after college at Iowa State, I moved to Minnesota and gain this awesome accent. Hopefully I can get rid of that, or I don't know if I want to get rid of it, but I am enjoying working here, and being a part of the community and yeah, having a lot of fun.
Welcome.
So-
We're very glad you're here.
All right, thank you very much.
With your ties to Iowa State, we're gonna forgive you for the move to Minnesota.
Okay, all right. You're not a Packers fan, are you?
No Packers.
Okay, all
Just a
right.
Cyclone fan.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Hello, Mayor Edwards and City Council members. Like Richard said, my name is Austin Tasler. Started in January, super excited to get back to the city of Clive. Grew up in the city, 100th place, was involved with all kinds of parks and rec activities. So kind of have come full circle here. Like Richard said, I'm super honored to be awarded that 30 under 30 award and keep pressing towards bigger and better things here at the city of Clive. So super excited to start summer, kind of hit the ground running here and ready to keep on going. So
Welcome, Austin. We're very glad you're here. I do have one question. Do most aquatics people start when it's below zero? I mean, it seems kind of,
not typically,
not typically?
Yeah.
Okay, just curious.
I'm an 80-degree kind of guy for sure.
All right, well, we can't wait for that weather either. So welcome. We're glad you're here. All right, Rick, I think you're next with an introduction.
I am. Thank you, Mayor. We tried this a month ago and Jonathan Hill was on an ambulance call helping out the community. So he's coming off a little illness, but he felt well enough that he's going to join us by Zoom here, I believe. A little bit about Jonathan is he comes to us as a paramedic. He has experience with the University of Iowa hospitals and Mayo Clinic, as well as Midwest Ambulance. He has a bachelor's degree from Buena Vista in biology with a minor in Spanish. Has a master's degree from Iowa State in biomedical science. Jonathan's, I would say an experiment. That sounds weird, but he's the first full-timer that we've hired without firefighter experience. So he's experienced with paramedic. He's quickly acclimating to that, and we're going to be starting him on his firefighter training. So he's worked with us since December 6th, and looks like he's joined us from Zoom land.
Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here. Glad I got it to work finally.
Are you feeling better? I suppose we should ask.
I am. Yeah, I got like a lot of people, I got the COVID bug about 12 days ago. So I've kind of been out of commission, isolating at home and just kind of laying low, but we're on the mend here. So I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. So that's always a good thing, and ready to get back to work here very shortly. For sure. I definitely miss it. So it's only so many things that can entertain you at home before you really start to get quite bored and just start to chomp at the bit, so to speak, to get back to it. So.
Well, welcome. We're glad you're here. We'll be glad to see you back in service here very soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Pleasure's all mine.
Jeff?
My turn. Mayor Council, good evening. Happy to be here tonight to introduce our newest employee. Recently had an employee find an opportunity for advancement in another city, create an opening for us. We were very fortunate to find this is Chase Berry. Comes to us. He has some truck driving experience, some construction experience, will fit in very well. A great opportunity for us to add someone to our team that has the experience, and we're excited to get him started here next Monday. With that, I'll let you grill him if you like.
Chase, welcome.
Hi.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I grew up down by Winterset, Iowa, and just a little ways from here, but familiar with the area. And I've always heard good things about the city of Clive and love the area. So I'm looking forward to hitting it hard this winter. So yeah.
Very good.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank
What kind
you.
of truck driving?
Over the road.
You ever haul garbage?
No, no.
Hey, he's got a job here now. No
I
recruiting.
lost
Yeah.
myself there for a second.
Yeah.
That's all I-
No, looking forward to it. So
Welcome, Chase.
thank you.
Thank
guys.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, it's an exciting time to welcome all these new employees. Next, we move into our action items. The first action item is a public hearing on the Harbach Boulevard Reconstruction Phase 1 project. And did we publish the appropriate public notice?
Public notice was published in the Des Moines Register on January 12th, 2022.
Thank you, Matthew.
All right. I know there are a few residents in attendance to discuss some of the design elements of the project. But I will go through the bid results prior to getting into that discussion. The city received bids on January 18th, 2022. Again, this project consists of total reconstruction of Harbach from 82nd Street to Northwest 78th Street. 5 bids were received, with Mainline Construction Incorporated being read as the lowest responsible bidder. You have a tabulation of those results included in your packet. Mainline was the contractor for phase 1 of the Clark Street project, and city staff felt they did a good job on that project, especially considering the various challenges that that project entailed. Notification to the neighborhood will continue, with additional notifications sent to the group once the pre-construction meeting with the contractor has taken place and more information is known. With that, staff recommends award to Mainline Construction Incorporated. And I guess now throughout this process, we've been engaging in discussion with the neighborhood, and there are some design element changes that may want to be considered, and Pete will go into more detail on those.
Thank you, Brandon. So first, I'd like to start by thanking all of the residents from the Harbach neighborhood. We have heard very clearly from them, and they have been passionate advocates for their preferences in this project. But probably more important than that, for years and years, these families, these households have been advocates for their neighborhood. They really care. And they've actually helped us, I think, refine our thinking about what the scope of this project should be. There have been 2 major items that have been topics of conversation with the neighborhood and residents. I know with many of you individually, as you've been engaging with staff and with the neighborhood as well. The first has been a discussion about the width of the street. Staff is recommending that we do stay with the 26-foot wide street. The pros for this approach, we believe, outweigh the cons of making the change. But the bulk of our conversations have been about the width of the sidewalk proposed on the north side of Harbach. So this is the area between 182nd Street over to the eastern extent of the project, this phase 1. At this time, the council, after engaging with council and also with the neighborhood, staff is recommending that a 5-foot sidewalk is the appropriate approach, with approaches that go up to that sidewalk from the street there at the intersections with the other streets that would accommodate a future 8-foot sidewalk should the city determine that they want to go back and reconsider the width of the sidewalk. But that again would be a process I'm sure that this council would want to undertake with extensive consultation with the neighborhood and consideration of other improvements that are being made in that area of Clive. And with that, we would be happy, Brandon and I would be happy to answer additional questions that you have at this point in the hearing.
All right. Ted, do you have questions?
No, I think I understand the issues pretty well, so I'm comfortable with the approach.
Okay. Others here?
So Pete, just to clarify, then the recommendation from staff is to go to a 5-foot sidewalk with the potential in the future, 5-10 years, some of that nature, as we develop the situation along Harbach with Diamond and some of the other things, to look at that, but that's nothing in stone. It just leaves the options open for the city. Is that correct?
That's correct. The geometry at the intersections can get a little bit more complicated and bring additional expense if we walk away from the 8-foot preparation now. But it's not a major expense, we believe, to in the future talk about the connections that's the big sidewalk area that these residents have been thinking about, the areas that are right in front of their homes.
Gotcha.
Mike?
I appreciate the time what the neighbors have spent on this, as well as staff, and appreciate the approach the city took on this with the multiple meetings, as well as Pete. I know you've walked that area several times and talked to them, and I think that's what we promised and came to a conclusion by doing that. Look, we did what we said. I'm pleased with the outcome, right? Whether it be 8 or 5 or 6 or whatever, I'm just pleased with how you went about doing it, right? I do want to muddy the water a little bit and go back to finishing this discussion with, we still have a trailer issue on the street that we need to, and I'm just sending the message out verbally here today that needs to be still pursued, right? Whether the neighbors are quiet or not, about 5 or 8 or 6, all that. we still need to cover that trailer and other parking and continue to look at the no parking options down the road as well and preempt this next construction piece that's coming in a few years with some changes to that street. I think now would be the time or in the next, in this next year, this year, to do those so that when we finally do get to that side that we've already heard all of the rumblings about those no parking and the difficulty of getting in and out. We looked at that as well when you boys and I and you walked that. Those cars were not from the daycare. And then also that no parking and that. The other thing I honestly, when we walk that neighborhood, I have a serious issue with, and we need to deal with, is the safety issue of these Kubotas. I mean, there's got to be 24 of them. Literally, and we watched them going through stop signs and not even pausing and driving all over the neighborhood. That has to be dealt with. That is a major safety issue from what I've seen, and I've been, I go through that neighborhood every day. So I like the outcome, but we need to keep working with that neighborhood and with some issues that are going on to right it.
Absolutely. Anecdotally, building on some of the things that we heard from neighbors and Councilman Klein that we heard from neighbors as well. We heard some other things about getting sidewalks cleared around some of the Glacier properties as well. And we immediately took that to code enforcement, and they then reached out to Glaciers to get results on that. And so we will stay there, make sure that all the property owners are doing what these property owners do, which is take care of their properties and make it a pleasant place for everybody to live and prosper together.
Right. I mean, certainly I cannot drive my Polaris or my Gator, let alone my lawn tractor up and down 86th Street or Harbach. The chief would be pulling me over. But if that's how we're going to do it, and it's going to be a Florida village, we all should get golf carts and Polarises, but otherwise we got to stop it. Somebody's going to get hit by one of those.
Okay. Thank you for that
Thank you,
direction.
Councilman.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Your Honor, I just
Susan?
have a question, well, two. One is with the Kubotas, are those being used on the sidewalk or the street?
Street.
Okay. And in terms of the potential to look at expanding the width in the future, I'm just curious, how would that happen? Would we have to tear out the 5-foot sidewalk and start over, or does it get added on an extra 3 feet on the side? Or what would it entail?
I'm gonna look to my colleague Brandon on.
Yeah, we
Come on up
probably,
to the-
yeah, we'd most likely want to tear out that full 5 feet and replace it with a new 8-foot section. And that's why we want to have it set up for the future at the intersections and driveways to have that ability to not have to tear those out in the future, just the segments in between the driveways and the approaches at the intersections. But yeah, looking at other areas, adding on an additional 3 foot isn't really the answer in that situation. So it'd probably be tearing it all out and putting in a full 8 foot, if that ever came about in the future, obviously.
All right, so with the 5-foot component, is that all going to be new, or are we just keeping what exists right now?
No, the existing sidewalks are actually more often than not 4 feet. But the bigger issue that we have is that they're forward and back, a little side to side. And that's because there's some unevenness in the city's right of way, property to property. That's also the reason why in this project, we want to get some permanent easements from a few of the property owners along Harbach so that we can standardize where that area is, which then also gives us consistent area to manage the right of way where we will have buried utilities. We know from our past experience in other parts of the city that more and more utilities, folks are coming in to use that space for burying things. And it will help us from a maintenance standpoint and a future maintenance standpoint to have that a standardized space. So the back of the sidewalk, which will now be a 5-foot sidewalk, will go all the way back to what is a standard right-of-way area for the city, presuming we are able to get all of these permanent easements that we still need.
And then the last thing would be, are there any liability concerns as this kind of migrates back and forth from the 8-foot to the 5-foot? Who's responsible at those junctures as
Mhm.
the grade changes or whatever.
Sure. So the grade changes, or like over the driveways, for example, the flat that needs to exist, that would be built to the 8-foot standard. And also at the intersections, there would be built to the 8-foot standard. But just like with our existing 8-foot trails that we have, residents would only be responsible for 4 of those 8 feet for clearing it for snow, keeping it obstruction free. Then they get into the main part of the sidewalk, it's gonna be 5 feet. So I think in practice, if they're shoveling snow the way that I do, or running the snow blower the way that I do, a couple passes gets you that 5 feet that you need, and that's gonna be all there is to it. Beyond that, it is the traditional situation where you have homeowners insurance, and the city also has its various coverages to accommodate different situations that happen. Let's
To
be clear.
clarify, it's the adjacent property owners that would be responsible for those sidewalks, just like anywhere else in the city.
Correct.
Okay, I think that's important too. We've got clarification. Thank you.
Anything else from you, Eric?
No, we might offer anybody in the public that wants to
Okay.
address it.
Right. Before we go there, Pete, would you explain the rationale for the 26-foot and the advantages of that?
Sure. So the city's engineering team did an extensive review of whether or not a 26-foot wide street versus the existing 31-foot wide street would be appropriate for this area based on traffic counts and other considerations. Their conclusion was that based on those counts, parking needs, and other things that we consider, that both a 31 or a 26 could work, but that the pros of a 26 were greater than the cons of that come along with that move. The primary pros were less impervious surface, so less stormwater that we have to worry about moving, more space for stormwater management that would be in the areas on either side of the street, more space for utilities not under pavement, public and private, because it results in a more cost-efficient future access to repair and replacement, improved driveway grades and intersecting roadway grades, less construction costs, less street maintenance and resurfacing costs, reduced crossing distance for pedestrians, and reduced vehicle speeds. Vehicle speeds is what we spent most of our time talking about with the neighborhood, because we've heard consistently that they think people are really moving up and down Harbach faster than they should and have been for some time. We believe that with the narrower street and parking on one side, that it will create that visual friction that drivers need to feel so that they behave more appropriately and drive appropriately for a neighborhood street.
Now, you mentioned driveway grade, so this, for some of the driveways, it'd be an actual improvement. It wouldn't be as steep. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and actually I had Brandon go back and take a second look at this. We have mapped every single grade for what it would be compared to what it is right now. And Brandon, I want to make sure I say this exactly right. Even with the 8-foot flat that will be introduced, there is no driveway on the north side or the south side of the street that will be steeper than what it is now. And in many cases, they will be less steep. Did I get that right?
Yep, that's correct. So yeah, we had to do a lot of various things to make that work. A lot of that was adjusting slightly the actual profile of Harbach itself, whether raising the center of the street or lowering it very slightly makes a lot of differences in grades. So when we go through designs, it's with the intent to not make any driveway worse than it is, and at the worst case scenario, match what the existing driveway is today.
And we gave special attention to what that flat might introduce, because that would be a change from the 4-foot that most of them have going across their driveways now.
And the city is covering all the costs of all this, the sidewalks, as part of the project.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Well, at this point, we're in a public hearing, and so we would welcome citizens who would like to come forward and speak to the council on that. Keep in mind that in the packet, we have the emails, the petitions, and other input. So if you'd like to speak, we welcome that. If you could highlight your key points in no more than 3 minutes. And if there's a spokesperson that wants to come forward, we would welcome that as well. So again, we're in the public hearing. If you come forward, please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Good evening all, and thanks for the opportunity to present this petition publicly to all of you. I appreciate it.
And could you tell us who you are?
Oh, my name is Terry Lowe. My name is Terry Lowe, but I represent the voices of a lot of people here tonight. We, the undersigned, are homeowners on Harbach Boulevard from 82nd to 78th Street and concerned homeowners on adjacent streets. In the planning stages for this project, homeowners that would be most impacted were never asked directly for input, directly polled for their sentiments, nor given clear-cut details of your plan until mid-October. Your timing gave those directly impacted very little time to organize into one collective voice and ultimately share those thoughts and concerns with the City Council regarding the project until now. We are strongly opposed to an 8-foot sidewalk trail going through our residential neighborhood. We understand your desire for connectivity, but do not agree that the proposed trail cutting through our properties while ending abruptly at 78th Street are the right solution. A future plan to a bike trail at this corner is also questionable, as both hills on 75th and 78th Street are not bike friendly, especially riding northbound from University. Connectivity might better be achieved in the future plans with a 5-foot sidewalk on the east side of 78th Street, leading down to Lundgren Park and University Avenue. An 8-foot sidewalk bike trail connecting the 7800 block of Clive to the 82nd block already exists, and it's on University. There are no hills, just a straight shot west to east, east to west, with future opportunities to connect north to Harbach using Northwest 84th Street and north to Lundgren Park using Northwest 80th Street. The more prudent, economical, and taxpayer resident-friendly option can be achieved by running 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of Harbach from 82nd to 78th Street. 5-foot sidewalks would also eliminate the need to move existing utility poles, resulting in a cost reduction. Phase 2 of your plan to widen the sidewalks from 82nd to 86th Street is logical, as it will best serve the community of apartments, schools, and businesses. Whereas your plan to run an 8-foot trail that connects through homeowners' yards and connects to nowhere does not serve the best interest of our residential community. We are also concerned about the need to narrow Harbach from 82nd to 78th while still allowing street parking. If the goal is to slow down traffic, this would also be accomplished with a 3-way stop at 78th Street and Harbach and another at the corner of Northwest 80th Place and Harbach. I understand that a lot of these concerns have already been addressed by you, and we appreciate that. But I also see that you're still going forward with the right-of-way for an 8-foot sidewalk in the future. That's a concern, but I respectfully submit our petition for your consideration, and thank you for hearing our voice.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for me?
Any questions?
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else here who would like to address the council concerning the matter? Seeing none, do we have anyone online, Pete?
And again, for participants online, if you'd like to get our attention, you can use the chat function, or you can use the raise hand icon, or if you're on the phone, you can press *9. Your Honor, I do not see any hands going up.
Very good. I would entertain a
Move to
motion.
close the public hearing.
A motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? The public hearing is closed by a vote of 4-0.
Move the resolution approving plans and specifications.
Second.
Further discussion?
Is that with a right? Oh, I got it. We would, if it is the council's direction to move that sidewalk to 5 foot, we would ask for a friendly amendment.
Correct. A friendly amendment on there with, in the 5-foot
So it's
specifications.
official in the record.
Correct.
And that'll be staff's direction. Your
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Second, okay. Clear, we're talking again about a 5-foot sidewalk as the residents have requested. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote on the resolution as amended? And would clerk please post the vote? And that passes by a vote of 4-0 to approve the plans and specs with the 5-foot sidewalk.
Move the receipt of bids.
Second.
Motion and a second to receive the bids. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? Receiving the bids passes by a vote of 4-0.
And move the resolution awarding the contract to Mainline Construction for $2,688,190.35.
Second.
Motion and a second on the resolution. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? So the resolution awarding the contract to our low bidder passes by a vote of 4-0. Thank you all. You're welcome to stay for the entire meeting. We've got a lot of interesting things coming, or you're free to go. Thanks. We appreciate, as others have said, so much your participation and your feedback. And as you see, we have the 5-foot sidewalk plan. So we look forward to the project. Thank you all. Next item, we have proposed ordinance number 1111, Warrior Lane rezoning. And Jill, I believe, is covering that one.
Yeah, can everyone hear me?
Yes, but we're looking at Ted. This is awful.
Again.
Yes.
There you go. Go ahead, Jill.
Thank you.
Good
So
stick
tonight
together.
is the second consideration for rezoning of a portion of Warrior Lane annexation included in the Shadow Creek plats 6 and 9 from R1 to PUD. Staff hasn't received any further public comments or questions regarding the rezoning. As a reminder, P&Z Commission and staff both recommend approval.
Thank you.
In your honor, staff would request that with no comments received, that the council waive the rules and proceed to final reading on this.
So to entertain a motion to waive the rules.
I move that the rule requiring that an ordinance be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to this meeting be suspended with respect to ordinance number 1111.
Second.
And we have a second. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote on suspending the rules? And will the clerk please post that vote? The motion to suspend the rules passes by a vote of 4-0.
Move that ordinance number 1111 be considered, placed upon its passage and adopted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 4-0. I declare that ordinance number 1111 is declared to have been enacted. Next item we have is proposed ordinance 1112, rezoning of C3 to PUD. Jill, we're still with you.
All right. As you mentioned, this is the second consideration for proposed rezoning of the property at 11428 Forest Avenue. This is the Sterling Inn property from C3 to PUD. We haven't received any public comment or questions on the project since the public hearing. The applicant's continuing to work with addressing the detention dog park area and communicating with the neighbors on parking. As we kind of mentioned before with the public hearing, that was still a little bit of a question on parking and the buffers. So he's continuing to get a hold of those neighbors and work on the parking situation there. And then we are also working with the applicant on a site plan, which hopefully could be also seen before you at the third consideration for the February meeting if we move forward.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions for Jill?
I'd move that ordinance number 1112, having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
Motion and a second for the second consideration. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? Second consideration of ordinance 1112 passes by a vote of 4-0. Now we move on to U-turn provisions. Matt?
Your Honor, as we discussed at the last meeting, this is updating a portion of our code related to U-turns and posting of U-turns. And so we're looking to update this code to conform with some recent cases that we've had to make sure it's clear for enforcement purposes. We haven't received any comments or questions on this, and staff would request waive to the third reading on this.
Move that the rule requiring that any ordinance be considered and vote on pass prior to this meeting be suspended with respect to ordinance number 1113.
We have a second.
Second.
Second, to suspend the rules.
Come on, Ted.
Further discussion?
I do have a question.
Yes.
So since we want to move to implement this quickly, do we have a plan for getting that information out to people? Can you just kind of briefly remind for those who are watching tonight what the change entails and then how we would communicate that?
And little tickets that go when they pull you over.
Oh, happy to. And so the main change here tonight is we did have a gap in our code where for prohibited U-turns, it was identified at intersections, signalized intersections, but wasn't identified in areas where we actually posted prohibited U-turns. Sometimes this happens in a median area. We had a specific situation near an elementary school where the school had requested we look at prohibiting U-turns because of the pickup and drop off point. And we found in our code that we didn't specifically state that posted that weren't in intersections needed to be included in our code. And so we will provide an informational item in our newsletter going forward to reflect this change. And we can easily do that here this year.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
And a lot of the other messaging that we do, I would.
100%. Yeah. And we do updates on these things on traffic enforcement on a normal basis. So we'll add this to the list.
Very good. Other questions? If not, would the council please vote on the motion to waive the rules? And would the clerk please post the results of that vote? So the vote to waive the rules hopefully passes. It does. 4-0. We've suspended the rules.
Move that ordinance number 1113 be considered, placed upon its passage and adopted.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? With regard to ordinance number 1113, it passes by a vote of 4-0. Ordinance number 1113 is declared to have been enacted. All right. Next on our agenda is council appointment to fill vacancy. Did we post a notice on this, Matthew?
Notice of intent to fill the appointment to fill the vacancy by appointment was published on January 17th, 2022 in the Des Moines Register.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank all of the candidates who are here this evening and who are applying. If you've looked at the resumes in the packet, we have an impressive group from which to choose. We hope that each of you will have the opportunity to serve Clive in some capacity. If you're not appointed, we hope you'll consider applying for our boards and commissions. Let me outline our process for this evening and see if there are any questions. We'll proceed in alphabetical order. So Mr. Bell will be first. The other candidates will be escorted to our green room by our city manager. And then we'll be brought back in one at a time. You'll be given 2 to 3 minutes to start with to give an overview. Please state your name and address for the record as you begin. And then we'll have questions from the council. Our plan is to have one question from each council member. Did everyone hear that? One question per council member? Okay, just, thank you, Ted. Appreciate that. After the interview, you can stay in the chamber. And then following the interviews, we will entertain a motion to appoint. 3 votes will be needed. There are only 4 council members that are eligible to vote. Mayor does not have a vote. And hopefully we can proceed from there. If the candidate gets at least 3 votes, then we would do a swearing in and then take a short recess. So that's the process that we have. After that, then we'll begin our budget discussion. Any questions on the process? If not, then Matt, we'll let you take all the candidates except Mr. Bell out and we'll get started.
You follow me?
David, please come forward and be sure to give us your name and address for the record and give us a 2 or 3 minute overview of what you'd like to tell us.
Request to take the mask off, please. That'd be acceptable.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, fellow citizens of Clive. My name is David Bell. I live at 15147 Bryn Mawr Drive. I've lived there since 2008. I wanted to briefly tell you a little bit about myself and then a little bit about what I learned back in 2013 over the course of the next 2 minutes or so. But I've been doing mortgages in Clive and been doing mortgages. Actually, I'm a resident and a business owner in Clive. I'm actually working on buying the building over on the western side of the city of Clive. I'm very excited about that. Been in mortgages for 22 years now. I've also been a veteran and I'm still serving in the military, 6 years in the Marine Corps Reserves as infantry, and then took a little time off so I could start my civilian career and joined the Air National Guard, where I'm currently serving as a human resource advisor for the 132nd Wing. My job is to promote diversity and inclusion for the entire wing to include other areas of the state. In addition to that, throughout the process of the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, which was actually utilizing the Georgetown University curriculum to teach emotional intelligence, unconscious bias, microaggressions, and effective communication. I actually had a chance to do that this morning. I was teaching a class on effective communications and emotional intelligence to intel operatives over at the 132nd. Truly enjoyed that time with the group that I used to actually serve as the first sergeant. In addition to my military service and my business career, I'm a certified coach, credit counselor, financial peace university instructor. And the through line of each one of these items is the fact that I have the heart of a teacher. That's a little bit about who I am. But now I want to talk about what I learned back in 2013. Because in 2013, we had a similar situation. And I came up for an appointment at that point in time. I was a successful business person. I'm like, I love my city. I want to help serve my city. And I came in and it was one of the most interesting situations because at that point in time, if I'm not mistaken, we had about 6 individuals that applied for the appointment. And one of the individuals was Mike, and I may mispronounce his last name. Was it pronounced Hammond?
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mike had actually ran for the election prior to, and he ran a very strong race. Then he came up for an appointment. Additionally, there was myself, a handful of other people that hadn't run a race, but were very interested in the position. One of them was Susan. And when it came right down to it, each one of us had a chance to come up there, Mike included, Susan, myself. We all presented, we all got to answer our questions. And I think we all did an amazing job. Being the first person is kind of like back in kindergarten, when you got the last name Bill, you're probably going to go first. So I got to listen to each one speak, and they all did an amazing job. Got to go home later and think about what transpired because Susan was appointed. And it wasn't because somebody was a successful business person. It wasn't because somebody had ran a race. It was because Susan had taken the time to serve in numerous different committees, numerous different action boards for the city, and even prior to that, and it was the League of Cities, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm naming it properly. And one of the things that she had that were leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else was her knowledge base when it came to the rainwater issue that we were dealing with in the city of Clive. So I had to step back and I had to realize for a moment, she was the right person for the job. Again, it had nothing to do with the sphere of influence where it came when this is what my job was and I'm a successful person over here, or hey, I ran a race. It had to do with the knowledge base that she brought to the equation. And so that's what I had to step away from. And I took and I said, you know what? To be able to serve at a higher capacity, you must first show that you're willing to serve at the points where people don't really notice. Some of the other committees, some of the other things that are going on. And from that point, the mayor asked me at the time, he said, would you serve on the Parks and Rec Board? You seem like you have an interest. You seem like you have a desire. I said, sir, I'd be honored. For 7 years, I served on the Parks and Rec Board for the city of Clive. And by the end of it, I was actually serving as the committee chair. And to sit in that chair with the gavel was actually very nerve-wracking at the beginning. Trying to make sure I was doing it right. Oh my gosh, it was scary. I got to sit on the Greenbelt Triad committees. I got to sit on the, I'm trying to remember the actual master planning for the Greenbelt Trail updates. And one of my favorite aspects was Canary Park, being able to help with the naming of Canary Park. That was so much fun. Some of the lesser fun things were just learning how visceral of a reaction people have when it comes to pickleball. Oh my gosh, I can get violent sometimes when it comes down to how those courts are used. But it's things that you learn in these smaller committees that will bring you to that knowledge base where you're like, okay, I'm ready to serve at a greater capacity. And I just wanted to share that aspect of what I learned, and I appreciate your time and your consideration.
Thank you, David. We'll start questioning with Eric.
David, thanks again for coming in and throwing your name in the hat here and going through the process. Really appreciate that and all your service as well. You know, Clive is a landlocked community now. We only have X amount of acres left in the city to develop. And so therefore we've engaged an initiative called the District 1 planning process, where we're looking at Eastern Clive and how do we reinvest in that? How do we do some things in involvement to just help to recreate that area in Eastern Clive? What are your thoughts about reinvesting and Eastern Clive and how we can rejuvenate that part of our city?
Thank you. Even more so to where we were 7-8 years ago when I stood here before, we are even that much further along the line now. And I tend to believe that the decisions that are made over the course of the next 3 to 5 years are going to be paramount to the sustainability of the economic situation that we have here in Clive. Because you're absolutely right. As we run out of the ability to grow, we've got to figure out another way to work our tax base. We truly do. And we have to start thinking outside the box. The paradigm that we currently have where we can just continue to do things in a conservative nature may not be the best approach. I mentioned it previously back in 2013, but one of the things that I realized when I've been able to travel, not just the world, but numerous different places throughout this country as well. And there are other cities that share similar issues to us. And I think there are things that we have that we currently are dealing with where you start looking at them together and you're like, these could pose different solutions for us. One big thing is we've got the rainwater issue and the flooding down on the 73rd Street area and what I refer to as 73rd and Old University. And for the longest time, I'm like, why do we not redevelop that area? In that redevelopment, we widen the stream area, but also give the ability to widen the area of the Greenbelt Park or trail that runs back there. In addition to this, redevelop the business area there to make this a place where people want to come. It would be an amazing, enjoyable area if we were able to really push for restaurants, bars, shops, similar to San Antonio and the Riverwalk. A lot of people don't realize that San Antonio had a very difficult issue that they faced years and years ago with flooding. When it rained, it poured there and it flooded those streets. They created a canal system and it was ugly. And they said, well, why don't we fill up the canal system and start setting up some restaurants and bars around here and have these restaurants and bars pay the tax base needed to take care of this. We pay actually a lot of money, this city alone, each year to make sure our Greenbelt Trail stays nice and beautiful, something that people want to utilize. If we could start utilizing the businesses around that trail, so one, they can actually get people off the trail and come on in, let's have a meal, let's have a drink, let's go buy something. They're making money, we're generating taxes. I think it's a huge boom for us, and we're just not looking at it properly. It seems like sometimes we're looking at it like it's a sacred cow, but that sacred cow could actually make us a lot of money if we used it properly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ted?
Yeah, David, so along some similar thinking, we're going to be landlocked here in a few years, and our capital expenditure needs, our ongoing services needs are not going to go away. Those are going to be some significant expenses that we're still going to be looking at, but we're not going to have the benefit of new construction growth to enhance our revenues. At the same time, we have a tax base, Clive residents who are used to a low tax levy, and they take pride in that, and we take pride in that. So how would you propose to balance that?
As a mortgage banker, I can tell you, I love mentioning the fact that the city of Clive has lower taxes than most of its other counterparts in the area. That is a nice little piece of the puzzle for us. I like the question. I appreciate it, because two different pieces to this question. One, we need to, again, start thinking outside the box. And I know that you guys as a city council have been doing this already, utilizing and merging services between the different suburbs. That makes so much sense in my mind. Again, no one cares what's written on the side of the ambulance when they need the ambulance to show up at their house. So being able to utilize the fire departments and the medical services and the police departments of all the different suburbs together so that we can mitigate some of our overall costs, huge. Number two, we have, and going back to the District 1 area, we have a lot of the houses that are some of the older places, and they could use some updating. How do we help motivate people to want to do this? Well, we don't have to really recreate the wheel in this situation. There are numerous different projects that we can use. I immediately think back to when I was a very young person and bought my first house at 22 in the Des Moines area. Wall was caving in, and there were so many different issues with this place. I wish I had somebody help educate me at that point in time, but I didn't know Ted as a realtor at that point. But one of the things that they have is they have neighborhood finance. They have different grant programs. Why could we not start looking at certain areas of Clive in very specific locations to say, can we partner up with a neighborhood finance or different grant programs to help incentivize individuals that are current homeowners and people that want to buy these houses in these areas to increase the value of those properties? I think it makes just a ton of sense to help the people understand what it takes. So you think about it, over the past year, we had a 17% increase in most housing prices. And we just had a crazy year when it comes to real estate. So that in and of itself doesn't help motivate somebody to take care of their property. It may not be a whole lot that you can do with certain individuals, but for those that do have an interest in it, well, gosh darn, if we can just help educate them and direct them to the points where, hey, if you need help with this, there are grant programs that are available. Let's get involved with some of those so that we can get these properties up to snuff and taxed appropriately to help cover some of the losses that we're going to have as we grow, as we're not actually allowed to grow any further.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
I think mine's a little simpler than all that.
Okay.
My question. Why now? There was an election 3 months ago, or 3 months or so ago.
Right?
Right?
Yeah.
So why now?
Thank you, sir. Why now? Truth be told, I actually stood for the appointment back in 2013. And this is not to pander to either one of you, but if you look at the surveys and you look at everything, the city of Clive is doing a very good job, and the city council is held in very high regard. My daddy always said, if it ain't broke, why fix it? You're doing a very good job. Why would I try to step in and say that I could do a better job than you? All four of you, Mr. Mayor, you included as well, would be mentors to me. You'd be people that I would want to learn from and say, how can we work together to actually make this town so much more by 2035?
Thank you.
Susan?
David, I appreciate your comments about 2013 and all you've done since then to apply yourself in the service of Clive. I wonder through that process, what you've learned about working to represent all the citizens of Clive and ideas you might have for encouraging engagement from more Clive residents to get involved in serving in such a way.
I think there's two pieces to that. The first one is that we're actually born with one mouth, but 2 ears and 2 eyes. So sometimes what we need to do is we need to just be quiet and listen. I heard a quote today and I'm like, this actually translates very well to our conversation this evening. And the quote is, no community has a bigger problem than they are willing to tolerate. When the community has an issue, they're going to let you know. They're going to share that, especially with the city council members. We need to be able to listen to everybody in the community, make sure everybody has a place at the table. Additionally, I know that one of the conversations going back to District 1, going back to the 86th Street and Union Park, the question with Diamond, what are we going to do with the building? I have this idea. And granted, I know that we have different concepts. One concept is make it a place where you could rent out, there could be meetings. Some of it is the idea of having a spot for the food bank. I totally concur with these two ideas. But why could we also not make this an education place? A place where individuals from the city of Clive can come in and they can learn things that maybe they didn't have the ability to learn when they went to school or didn't have the ability to go to college. What if we had free education when it came to credit scores or budgeting, Financial Peace University, or a version of that? Why do we not take just a little bit of time and teach a handful of the individuals that work for the city some of these skill sets? So then it's like a train the trainer situation. And then we can take that to that next point where not only are we train the trainers, but then we start talking to the individuals I've heard over the course of the last election, getting out there and communicating to everybody, spreading that word out. Well, sometimes what we have to do is we have to get to that generation that is the link. Where if there is a language barrier, we get that link between the language barrier, that second generation that speaks both languages. And we let them learn these skill sets. So the individuals that may be in the low to moderate to middle income families, they start learning the information they need to know to make sure their credit score is better. How to simply budget. 60% of people will say that they have an issue or a concern with living paycheck to paycheck, but only 33% of families in the American communities actually budget. Well, I see that as an issue. Much of that is just an educational thing. Let's teach people how to do it. Let's walk people through the steps, but it can't always just be one person doing it. Let's train people that can speak the languages and get that information out there to everybody so that everybody knows this information. Knowledge is power, but knowledge and action actually is so much more powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt? You may step down.
Thank you, sir.
And remap.
Thank you.
Again, you have 2 or 3 minutes to give us an overview.
All right. Well, thank you so much. My name is Hope Johnson. My address is 15058 Summit Drive, Clive, Iowa. Most of you have gotten to know me over the last several months at least, as I ran for office for a city council seat. And I ran knowing that there would be an opening, that there would be a possibility. And there were a couple of options, either I could sit and wait and apply for the appointment. But I decided that I had control of how hard I worked, how many doors I knocked, how much money I raised from the community. And I wanted to have that control. Also, it gave me an opportunity to initiate all these meetings with staff members, with members of the community, with stakeholders to find out what mattered to them. And a reason that I ran also was to increase engagement. I've been here since 2004 and I love this city, but sometimes I felt distant from the city leaders. And some of that is just because I was involved in other things. I did volunteering in my church and in my school. And I wanted to promote the city and help people understand what the city council does and why it's such an important thing for people to be engaged in and know who's on the city council and stand up and go out to the polls and vote for the people that they supported. So I was proud that I earned 1,647 votes. I was honored to earn the support of a good number of the community, including raising a good number of donations from within Clive, within the community. The vast majority of my fundraising was from Clive and the surrounding communities. And I'm really proud of that. You have some great candidates. You have 4 great candidates to consider tonight. They all have different backgrounds. And so it's a little bit of a challenge for you to consider these different backgrounds. You're comparing apples to oranges to bananas to grapes, as I mentioned to somebody today. So really, I think what you need to ask yourselves is, what does the city need? What does the city council need? I think all of you, there's not a lot of turnover on the city council, and that's wonderful. It means we have some serious stability. It means that we have great institutional knowledge, but it also means that there has been limited opportunity for new ideas. And whoever you pick will be bringing new ideas, will be bringing a new perspective. I come from a different professional background, coming from communications and journalism, and so my way of thinking is a little bit different. And my personal experiences are also different from people who are currently on the city council. So I think that I could bring something that is not necessarily represented in the other candidates, although all are great. I think you all need to think about what piece could be added to benefit the city. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. We'll start questioning with Eric.
Oh, thanks again for throwing your hat in the ring and applying for this position. Really appreciate that. One of the things with the city of Clive is it is landlocked, so we're running out of room. So we have distinct areas where we're starting to run out of new developments right there. One of the things we've done is focus on our eastern portion of Clive with the District 1 planning. This is an opportunity to reinvest in that eastern portion of Clive and bring it up. What are your thoughts about the eastern portion of Clive and ways that you would suggest to improve the eastern part of Clive or the District 1 area?
Right, absolutely. And I know that you were part of that 86th Street committee that was studying that, and I appreciate that. And Mr. McCoy lives over on that area and then has a special perspective as well. Something that makes our city unique is this long, weird shape, which is interesting because it changes, the character of the city changes so much dramatically from District 1 to what I think is going to be District 8 at some point as with redistricting. And something that is special about that District 1 is that it includes a lot of people who have been here in Clive for a very long time, people whose roots are here, people whose families come from here, and it also includes our newest residents, people who are immigrants, people who this might be their first stop in America, and they're bringing their unique experiences from it I think that the changes that could happen at Linan Park that have been talked about for a while should really celebrate both of those aspects. It's one of the designs that I saw was sort of a walkway that's would sort of present, maybe a market option. And I think it would be wonderful if we could celebrate the different cultures that we have in that District 1, especially very close to Linan Park. And really kind of raise up some of the people who maybe haven't necessarily had a voice in Clive because they just haven't been connected yet. They haven't had the background to know how to connect. They may have a language barrier. And I think if we reach out to people who live in that community, we can really strengthen our city as a whole. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Ted, your turn.
Right. Well, thank you, Hope, for being here. And I want to start off by just congratulating you on a great campaign. You really did run a great campaign, and you should be very proud of what you did. We've all, everyone at the dais and myself have run campaigns, and we know how hard it is and how much commitment it takes. And so I just wanted to applaud you for that publicly.
Thanks.
My question is maybe a little similar to Eric's, but as he said, we're going to be landlocked here in a few years. And when that happens, our capital expenditure needs don't go away. Our ongoing services needs don't go away. So our expenditures are going to remain high, and we're not going to have the benefit of all the new construction growth from our revenue side of things. So we're going to still have to balance those needs. How do you think we should handle that situation?
Right. Thanks, Ted. One of the things that makes Clive unique is our relatively low tax rates. And I know some people were concerned during my campaign, was I going to come in and say, oh, no, we need to raise taxes so that we can pay for all our services? That's not really what I would want, because the low rate is part of what pulls people into Clive. That's what attracts people to Clive. We need to stand out as one of the western suburbs, and that's one of the ways that helps us stand out. I think we need to think about new ways to bring in revenue. Of course, redevelopment will increase taxes that are coming in to support our city. Just on the way here, I heard an piece on the radio about cities around the country doing crowdfunding for certain things. I don't know that that's the way to fund a city, but for some things, I thought that might be an idea. We have the big triad projects coming up, and one of the things that the article, the piece talked about was people want to be able to invest. Even people who don't have the means to invest $10,000 or $1,000 or even $500, if they can be part of it and donate $25, then they are invested in the community, and they can take sort of ownership of, the walkway. So just sort of making sure that our foundation, our Clive Community Foundation, embraces those kinds of things, where reaching out to people who are not big donors, but who can find small ways to contribute. I hope that's enough of an answer.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Michael.
A little leniency on this one question, if you would, Mayor. It may be two-part, but again, like others have said, congrats on your campaign, and you and I have talked several times about it. And,
yes.
You worked very hard at that campaign.
Thank you.
And you should be proud of the number of votes you received from your residents as a total.
Thanks.
So well done. And it's nice to see that you're not stopping there. So my question tonight to all of you to stay kind of consistent is, but I'm going to spin it a little with yours. Why now, right? There was an election in November. Why now? And I get your why now, But you mentioned a few things that go into that. You say, and I've heard you say it in the campaign as well. You've been here since 2004. You wanted to promote engagement with the elected officials.
Mhm.
You thought they were somewhat ghost to most people. You will go on to say tonight, we need to ask ourselves, what does the city need? And so my two-part question is, what is the city need? I haven't heard it yet from you. And also that you mentioned you bring in something different than the other three candidates,
Mhm.
something distinct and different. What is that?
Sure. Well, as I talked about during the campaign, of course, my background is in communications. And I think that there are ways that we need to reach out to people more. The printed newsletter has huge readership, way beyond what is average for those kinds of publications. So we're reaching those people. But there are lots of people who are not at all engaged. There are people who are not on Facebook. And so having events might be, we have the wonderful Clive Festival, and that's great. That's a great event. Maybe reaching out during smaller events to invite people in to talk to the city leaders and get to know them, maybe an open house that shows this is what the city council does. And there's not going to be a huge amount of interest in the city council, but you've got a lot of people on the Zoom today. You had a lot of people here. So it is an option. So that communication background would be one difference that I could bring. I also have the perspective of someone who has been on the outside, who's not been on the inside. And so I see the leadership, I have been seeing the leadership before as what's possible, thinking what's out there and what new we can bring in. Did you have a follow-up that I didn't answer?
Well, I guess a little bit more on what additional communications and what is that distinct difference than the other four. Maybe I'm missing it, but.
Well, one specific thing that I remember from a meeting was also that one of the council members was talking about the family pool passes and talking about how I think the rate was, a little over $200, and the comment was, well, that I don't remember the specific wording, but the sense was that's not a big deal. It's a good deal. It's not a big deal. I stayed home with my children for their early years. I did not bring in an income. $200 was significant. We had to think, it was not just oh yeah, we're going to do that. We had to think about that. The other people who are currently on the council and based on the backgrounds of the other candidates, my guess is that $200 would, you don't have to blink an eye. It's possible. It's not a huge burden. That's a perspective that I'm not sure. And of course, I don't know your incomes, but seeing the professions that you're in, the levels that you're at in your professions, $200 might look different to you all than it does to me. And we have a good number of residents who might look at it differently than people in Country Club or Points West look at it.
I appreciate that. I will remind, not that I want to go back and forth, but I do remind you that also there's several council members that said they are willing to buy a
Absolutely
season pass for individuals.
And you said that specifically.
And there's others as well. So
yes,
yeah, that's not left.
No, I know that was mentioned at that same event in terms of scholarships, and I'm excited to see that's possibly on the horizon. one that also raised a question. I would love to be able to make sure that all of our kids know how to swim. If there would be a way to make sure that all of our kids had access to a safety swimming class, regardless of income, if there would be a way to accommodate that, I think that would be wonderful. Some of that could come from that, that kind of grassroots fundraising, the Clive Community Foundation. People would be interested in donating to specific causes like that. We don't necessarily need to pull from the budget for all these special things, but there would be interest in that and planting new trees and those kinds of things that you all have talked about.
Good. Thank you. Susan.
Well, I join the others in congratulating you on a campaign. Not only did you work to reach out to individuals, but you did come spend time at council meetings, that kind of thing, and definitely recognized. Through that process, I am wondering your thoughts on how you would propose to represent all the citizens of Clive and to promote more engagement from citizens of Clive.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought about early on was trying to be more visible. And these may be things that you all have tried and realized that there's just not a demand. For example, coffee with your council person. Maybe you've set them up repeatedly and nobody ever showed up and you realized it's not worthwhile. But that would be, one thing that I would like to investigate, making sure that people see us and that we're visible at events and out in the community, and not just the ribbon cuttings, not just the big events, but making sure that we're touching base at library story times and things so that we can actually connect with the people who are using our services. And then also making the effort to reach out to people who are not otherwise engaged. You all have told me about how pleased Clive residents are, that they've responded wonderfully to the surveys, well above national averages, to the point that it's in the superlative categories. So people are happy. And that's what I found when I was knocking on doors. But if we're not reaching out to those people who aren't already involved, it can be hard. I would love to make sure that council members find a time to go out and knock doors when it's not their campaign. Talk to people, go visit 20 different families that you've never had contact with and talk to them about the city. You're going to get new ideas. You're going to get new people who have had no connection. Just a couple of small things that I think might be helpful.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
The floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you everyone for coming out here. I'll try to keep this a little bit entertaining.
And if you could tell us who you are.
Yep, so my name is Shrikant Mikulaneni. I live on Sunset Terrace, and I've been a practicing attorney for 8 years now. And I believe the experience and the skill set that I bring would complement what skills and expertise the council already has. And it'll help drive the continued success of this council and Clive. I'm also an avid futurist. And basically what that means is I like to break things and then figure out if I can put it back together. And I've been incorporating that in my practice for as long as I've been practicing. So I started out as a patent attorney, and I've now focused my practice on technology law and especially on data privacy and data security. So in my current role, I lead a global privacy program for a $3 billion publicly traded company. And if you can imagine, that requires quite a bit of stakeholder buy-in, finding consensus, working together as a team. And we have various subsidiaries all across the globe. And what that means is we have to be very efficient in finding overlap, finding efficiencies in our processes in order to drive those goals and still meet our numbers, right? And that's something that I work with my teams every day in. I think it's something I could add to the skill set here. And again, the goal here is to continue the success of what we've already achieved in Clive, right? I really think that there's some challenges ahead for us, but I don't think it's anything we can't accomplish and address. You know, we've already heard about some of those. We've got some regionalization efforts going on. We've got some issues with, not necessarily issues, but we are changing kind of our perspective as a city. And that will require some change. But I don't think we should lose what we've had and what we've established already. And I think it's important to keep that history and that history of success that we have. One other thing I'll add is, you know, there's kind of this default almost today, and this isn't unique to Clive or the state of Iowa. There's a default to kind of assume the worst sometimes in people that don't necessarily agree with you. I don't think that that's productive, and I think we need to get away from that. And I think Clive does a really good job of trying to do that. And I think a lot of that is basically what I was saying before, finding those connections, finding the overlap in the goals in order to get the outcomes that we want. And I think having those differences itself is not a bad thing. It can lead to better results. There's a lot of times when I work with my business units where they tell me something that as a lawyer, I'm not thinking of, but they are as business folks, and it drives a better outcome. So I think that experience, that skill set, and honestly, my professional training leads me towards objective counsel. The whole idea is that you remove yourself from tainting the outcome based on your philosophies or feelings, and you look purely at what's best for your client. And that may be a city, maybe a business, maybe an individual. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Now, having just said that, I'm going to pivot to something to a bit more personal note. And I'm going to say, you know, I was born and raised in Iowa. I grew up in Burlington, right on the river. So floating on the Mississippi was like one of our pastimes, right? So I'm very experienced with how special Iowa is. But I say this with 100% sincerity. I really do believe Clive is in a league of its own. It is something that I haven't been able to find anywhere else. And it is one of the best places to live, and it's certainly one of the best places to raise a family. My family and I, my wife's here, Crystal, and we take full advantage of the Greenbelt trails and the parks, Clive Festival, the Food Truck Fridays in Campbell Park, all of it. And we love it, you know, but what really makes Clive special is the community. You know, we have a neighborhood, for example. My kids right now are with our neighbors because, you know, they need to go to bed. They're too young. They're 4 and 16 months old. And so we have no concerns about leaving them with our neighbors to go to sleep while my wife and I are here. That's not something you can say everywhere. So I think that truly makes Clive special. And I want to be able to be a part of that and provide my skills and, you know, add to the success that we've already had.
Very good.
Thank you.
Eric, you're the first questioner.
Srikant, thanks again for coming here and throwing your hat in the ring and being part of this process and applying for the open council position.
Yep,
really
thank
appreciate that. The city of Clive it's developed and it's landlocked at this point. So we're developing our last certain areas of acres out there. So What we starting to focus and pivot to is Eastern Clive, and the District 1 is what it's called. With this planning processes, we're looking for ways to reinvest and reinvigorate some of the older neighborhoods of Clive.
Right.
What are your thoughts on reinvesting or reinvigorating these older neighborhoods or classic neighborhoods? And how would you approach? Would you take?
Well, I think we saw part of that today, right? Like earlier in the meeting today, right? We listened, the council listened to the citizens that were living in that area, right? They listened to the concerns there. You adapted the plans while still keeping in mind the overall goals, right? And I think part of that is relying on the internal expertise that we already have, the city staff that is living this, as well as, the citizens who are living in those affected neighborhoods. And really just, again, going back to what I was saying before, finding those overlaps, finding the pieces that fit together. And maybe there's some misunderstandings along the way that you have to bridge those miscommunications to get people to understand that, this is what we think. This is why we're proposing what we're proposing. And then alternatively, they come back and push back and say, well, have you thought about this? I think that's the key piece to it. But ultimately, I think it comes down to listening to the internal expertise that we already have, and then listening to the people that are directly affected and coming up with the best solution that way.
Thank you.
Ted.
All right, Shrikan, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. We love having such qualified candidates such as yourself as part of this process. It really does enhance the process. It makes our job a lot tougher, but very much appreciate you being part of it.
I'm okay with that for now.
Right. So as Eric said, we're going to be landlocked here before too long. And despite that, we're going to continue to have significant capital expenditure needs, ongoing services needs. And so those expenditure levels are not necessarily going down, but at the same time, we're not going to get the new construction revenues that we would have been getting. And then at the same time of that, we've got residents who are used to a low tax levy, and it's part of the big appeal of Clive. And so how would you balance those? Do you have any thoughts on how to balance those competing interests?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think it comes down to, finding efficiencies, right? And if that means looking at more regionalization efforts, right? Like where can we where can we share those costs with other communities to drive, the same level of service? We don't want to see a dip in the services, but if we can do that and we can share that cost, spread that, in the legal field, we call that sharing liability, right? So we can spread that out a little bit. That makes sense to me, right? But again, I think it has to be a concerted effort where we take into consideration, again, the level of service that we want to provide and the citizens expect, and keeping that in mind as well. It's not just cost cutting for the sake of cost cutting, right?
Right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael.
One very quick question, then my formal question, but it's hard to read you because you're not sufficiently nervous enough arguing in
I'm glad I'm hiding it. I'm glad I'm
arguing in front of Professor Edwards in his courtroom, per se, right? Coming from Drake and hailing from Drake.
Yeah, no, I am curious about my critique later from Mayor Edwards.
Oh, you'll get one. You will get one. We all do. So that's coming. My question is, why now? We had an election in November.
Right.
Why not put your name in the hat in November?
Yeah, no, and that's an excellent question. I did apply to the Planning and Zoning Commission opening that was available last year. I've been involved in other aspects of the state bar, the community, as far as charitable organizations. I was on the board of Mentor Iowa, and also career related, right? So I was on the board of the Iowa Intellectual Property Law Association. I'm currently on the board of the legal section
of the accrediting national or international accrediting organization that for privacy attorneys like myself. So I like to stay busy. I like to stay involved, but you know, one of the things that kept me from running in the November general election this last year for Clive, I was actually accepted into it's called a Leadership Council on Legal Diversity. I was accepted in that program in late 2020, and it was a program that ran, it started in January of last year and ran directly through until right before Christmas is when it ended. And it was very intense, very time consuming, you know, and it just didn't allow for me to be able to do that at that time. But now I'm an alumni of that program. I'm still a local advisor, and I'm also co-chairing the Drake Law School's DEI alumni board. And so, you know, I fully believe in community service, and part of it, you know, is I want my girls to see that too. That's something that, you know, you have to lead by example.
And your wife doesn't think you're nuts.
That's
good.
That
She's
jury's
not
still out.
reeling you back, so that's okay. That's good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Susan.
Shrikant, great to see you. I really appreciate hearing about your interest in and love of Clive and number of ways that you've participated in the various things the community has to offer. As you have done that, I wonder if you've considered how you would represent all the citizens of Clive and what might be done to help some of those citizens become more engaged in the community.
Yeah, you know, I definitely have, right? Like I'm truly somebody that believes that there's no such thing as too many viewpoints, right? The more viewpoints, the more diverse thought we can get in the process, the better the resulting outcome. Now, it may seem chaotic and unmanageable at first, but there are ways to manage that. And I think, you know, I think the staff here and the council that's already here, I think that's completely manageable within their capabilities. Specifically, I think what I would say is there's an aspect that we can use technology to help drive this. And I think there may be some things that we could implement that would help bring that level of engagement up to, you know, more than what it is already. And I think that may be the first step. And again, you know, this isn't kind of a default answer, but it is true. We need to listen to what our internal expertise is leading us towards or advising us, as well as what are the community members actually just saying they want? What do they need? What do they want to see?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The
Thank
floor
you.
is yours for 2 or 3 minutes to give us an overview, and then we'll have questions for you.
Oh, thank you, Honorable Mayor and respected council members. Thanks for this opportunity. My name is Nagi Maineni. I'm a Clive resident for the last almost 20 years now. I moved here from Illinois, and before that I was born and raised in India. I'm a physician by profession, but that's just a job for me, and I'm actively involved in the community, do a lot of social work, and spend a lot of time on the green belt. When this opening came, I thought it's a great opportunity for me to step in and see what I can do for the city I love and I live in. And we raised 2 kids here. I'm a business owner in the community. My wife is a business owner too. And we always loved living here. And I didn't think I needed more reason than that to actually see if I can serve in the council and see what I can do to make this place even better. What else can I tell you guys? I think we have a great place. I don't have to say that again and again. But definitely any place can be better by making it safer, improving on the schools, making the public places better. So the community is more actively involved. And I think that's what keeps people stay in the community. Otherwise the kids will move away and never want to come back. And I think it's one of the main reasons why we should continuously work as a team and see what we can do to make the community stronger. With that, I'll take any questions you guys have for me.
Very good. We'll start with Eric. Eric?
Doctor, thanks again for applying for this process and throwing your hat in the ring and appearing here tonight. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
The city of Clive has a few hundred acres left that, and until we are completely landlocked right now. So one of our pivots and focuses is on the District 1 area, the area of Clive and Eastern Clive right here. We're putting a plan together to how can we reinvest, how can we reinvigorate this area as it grows older, and we're looking at ways to improve that. What are your thoughts on the eastern portion of Clive, and how could we improve that?
That's a problem most cities will have. There will be some neighborhoods that are old and they always need rejuvenation. And one way to do that is to involve the locals who live in that area, see what their ideas are to make that area better. Every homeowner will have their own interest in how their area will look better or do better. So get more public opinion and what can be done. It's usually not my opinion. As a council member, I would like to listen to other people's ideas, work as a team, see what we can do to make it better. So in any neighborhood, just like we talked about the Harbor, the street, improving the street, improving the sidewalks, improving and attracting more local businesses to come in that area. One of the best examples is the Ingersoll area in Des Moines. That's an older neighborhood. And look at it now, it's a nice hip area for people to go hang out and, have a meal and spend time. So similar ideas can be adapted by attracting more business owners to come there, start maybe boutique shops or, coffee shops, something like that. But again, it all has to come together as a community with everybody's input, see what works and what doesn't work.
Thank you.
Ted.
All right. Nice to see you, Nagi. Thank you for being here. I know we traded voicemails today. I'm sorry we weren't able to connect, but I do appreciate the effort. Just wanted you to know that.
Awesome. Thank you.
So as Eric mentioned, we're going to be landlocked here before too long, within a few years. But we're going to maintain our needs for some significant capital expenditures, ongoing services, and things of that nature. So our expenditure levels are not necessarily going down, but we're going to lose the new construction revenue that comes with all of that growth that we've had over the last few years. At the same time, we have Clive residents who have come to expect a low tax levy, and it's part of our appeal within the metro is that we have a low tax levy. So do you have any thoughts on how we could balance those competing interests between the ongoing expenditures versus declining revenues?
Yeah, that's a trick. That's a tough one because yes, we are landlocked. There's not much areas where we can grow or do more building but what we can do is definitely attract, like I said, attract more businesses that actually can pay more taxes locally or generate jobs locally. So we can get a little bit more revenue like that. There's no other way we can do that. And if we provide services to the people, to our community, and make this an attractive place for them to live, I think people will be willing to pay a little bit more to enjoy more facilities, and thereby our revenue will also get better. But it is a balancing act. It's a tough one. And like I said, you have to see what works and kind of go with the flow.
Thank you.
Michael.
Mine's in line with why now, right? So we had a city-wide election in November.
Mm-hmm.
Why not in November and why today?
Well, because there's an opportunity, and I don't like losing opportunities. So that's one reason. Second thing is, yeah, it could be November too. If you have excellent candidates. So I'm not thinking I'm the only one running here. And so if I don't get a chance now, maybe I'll try again in November. So I'm not shy. I'm looking at this as a long-term opportunity rather than just filling until December of next year. And I have 2 kids we raised in West Des Moines schools and Clive schools, and I'll be an empty nester this summer. And even as a physician, I'm fairly busy. I think I'll have enough time to be more involved in my community and able to do some work.
Thank you. Susan.
Haggy, good to see you. You've lived and worked in Clive for some time. And I'd like to hear how that long-term experience has informed you on how to best represent the interests of all citizens of Clive, and any ideas you have on getting people more engaged from among those citizens.
When we moved here, obviously we looked at the west side of Des Moines because that's where the growth seems to be. And so it's between West Des Moines, Urbandale, Clive, and Johnston areas. What attracted us to Clive is because it's a nice community, close access to the highways, good schools, and a very safe neighborhood. And I still think most of the young parents or families who are moving here, that's what they will look for. So it's very important to maintain the safety and security of our citizens by having a strong civil, city services that we can provide, municipal services that we can provide to the city that will attract people, staying engaged with the schools and keeping the quality of education standards high. The third most important thing that we are kind of behind, I think, is more interaction and more things to do for people outside. I still, other than the green belt, to me, I look like there's not too many things we would do. We would rather run downtown or somewhere else to find entertainment. So if we can find things, maybe a small festivals like we do with the food trucks and stuff at Campbell Park, something like that, maybe in different areas. Maybe we can have a community center that we don't have. If somebody in Clive wants to get married, they have to go to West Des Moines or Windsor Heights, and so we don't have many facilities. So maybe improving on those kind of things. Maybe improving on places where people can hang out and have like a setting of Ingersoll-like neighborhood, where it's nice to go hang out for an hour or two in the evenings. These are the things I think people will look for. And I think if we can work on those lines, and with our limited space, if we can use the space better and attract more small businesses, I think our community will be great. And I think the outlook is very bright.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. And now have a seat.
Well, thank you.
Council, you've now heard from our 4 candidates, 4 very strong candidates. And again, as you've heard us say previously, we greatly appreciate you participating in the process, and we're very pleased to have such quality individuals. Now the hard part comes in choosing from the 4. So what we need is a motion to appoint, and then if that motion gets 3 or more votes, then we would proceed to swear that individual in. But we need to have start with a motion for one of the 4 candidates. If anyone wants to make such a motion, we'll see if it gets 3 or more votes.
I'd make a motion to appoint David Bell to fill the vacant city council position for the remaining of the term.
A motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Oh. Okay. We'll give that to Mr. Weaver, I think. So we have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to make comments, John, if I could.
Go ahead, Ted.
So, we've got 4 eminently qualified candidates, and I think this is just proof of why we do the appointment process, because I think it brings out more candidates that we at the leadership team get to meet and get to know that we might not have otherwise. And I I know I feel very encouraged about that, that we've got some additional folks now that, my hope is, regardless of how the vote comes out tonight, that all of them stay involved and that we can plug them in. We've got, we've got the Clive Foundation, we've got Economic Development, Parks Board, whatever their skill set is and their interests are. I would like to see them, plugged in into our community, and let's build that relationship further. And I want to invite each of them to contact me, and let's have coffee or lunch or whatever, and let's talk through it more. How you judge each of the candidates is, there's just different ways to do it, right? I mean, each has their own perspective and their background that can bring value on day one. And so you can look at it that way. If someone's run a campaign, they deserve credit for that. And the commitment that it takes to do that and the hard work, there's a lot of credit that should go into that. And we need to applaud that and recognize it. But there's also the past experience and the years of service to the city that needs to be looked at as well. And so that's, for me, again, it's a tough call because these are all great candidates, but it's the kind of 7 years of experience and service to the city. That's the reason why I'll vote for David, but it's not a vote against anyone else. I want to make sure that that's clear.
Thanks, Ted. Any further?
Well, I've never said this before, at least on the record, that I couldn't agree with Weaver anymore with his comments. And we've had all these resumes and cover letters for a few days now, right? And I've only been involved in a couple of appointments, one being my own originally in 2012. And I can't tell you that I remember a stronger pool than what you have today. And that is credit to, I think, well, them for sure, but to the city as well, that they are all willing to do this and put their names out there. So again, I don't want to repeat everything Ted said, but that is it. It is a win for everybody just to have those names in there, every one of them. And the argument goes beyond all that of what Ted said. So if we can somehow figure out how to keep all engaged, boy, that would be something else on boards and other committees. So I think it's up to us as a peer on how we engage them after tonight and keep them engaged. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, I would just like to say that I echo the comments that have been made from everyone here at the table. You heard the question that I asked each candidate tonight, which was, how can you best represent all the citizens of Clive? And I want to acknowledge that we've heard from a number of citizens who acknowledge that a campaign occurred in 2021 and asked that we give consideration to the candidate in that campaign. And I responded to each of those that I wanted to keep an open mind to hear from each candidate tonight. And that I said that I struggle a little bit with the appointment process and knowing, are we best able to choose, or should that be up to the citizens of Clive? But if I had felt strongly about taking this to a special election, I would have brought that up sooner. I think this is the place to start with an appointment, but I've said that if we end up with a petition being circulated for a special election, I will sign it because I'm very interested in input from all the citizens of Clive. That said, I also feel very strongly that a community looks to its leaders and those they see in a leadership position to see themselves and feeling that they are fully represented. And we're placed with, or we are given a unique opportunity right now to evaluate what that looks like to people. And I would just have to say that I would like to place another name in nomination for consideration, but I'm unsure if we need to move with the nomination in second, or if I would bring that name up now.
I think we've got a motion and a second on the floor, so procedurally, we need to vote on that.
Okay.
Council, do you want to, if you could nod or?
I did unmute just in case there was, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Judkins, you're welcome to, of course, socialize that name, but that is correct. There is a pending motion. The Roberts rules would allow 2 pending motions at any time, but the mayor can determine which vote or which motion is voted on first. Does that help with some clarification?
Yeah, yes, that muddies the water for certain.
You're welcome.
It's clear as day, but what you're asking for is more mass confusion, but I get it.
Okay, well, I'm willing to follow your direction that we would act on the initial motion first and
Oh,
then.
very good. Eric, you had a question?
Yeah, and Ted, I think Ted's summed it out very, very well. You know, we've got a great diverse pool of applicants, and really all of you have done incredible things. And I applaud you for everything that you've done, both professionally and for the community as well. So, you know, we're very fortunate to have a deep of folks we have. So great. I want to talk a little bit about the appointment process and versus a special election. You know, when you look at these things from a council perspective, you have to ask yourself a couple of questions. One is, what's the past experience of this council of appointments, and have they been successful? Well, in 2012, we appointed Mike McCoy to a seat, and 10 years later, Mike is still an active and a valued member of this council. In 2013, we appointed Susan Judkins to her seat, and she has been here closing in on 10 years and has been an active and very asset to this council as well. So from when you look at our past history, I think this is a solid indicator that this council takes these decisions very seriously and looks at the candidates and the potential. And I think we're 2 for 2 with having 2 solid people right there. With that being in mind, when we talk about special elections, we talk about a $14,000 bill to the city of Clive, to the citizens of Clive right here for potentially a 2-year term. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of potholes that could be filled. That's a lot of public programming that could go on in the library. That's a lot of things. So with that being said, I'm an advocate for the appointment process based upon the cost of a special election, based upon our past track record of success with appointments right there. But I want to applaud all of you. It's difficult, and it's difficult to run campaigns. Trust me, I've ran a lot of them. I understand that, and I applaud you for your effort right there. But appreciate you guys coming out. All of you have positive things to put forward to the community, and there's lots of ways to serve. But really appreciate everybody, and you tremendously talented pool of people.
Thank you. Before we proceed to vote, I'm going to go back to legal counsel. If we are successful in having 3 votes for a member and that is approved, then we would proceed to swear in that individual. However, anyone would have the opportunity within 14 days to file a petition with a little over 400 signatures to request a special election. Now, council, would you clarify that if need be?
That's correct, Your Honor. If the appointment occurs this evening, that does trigger the next or an optional next step. And that would be under Iowa Code 372.13, subsection 2, which sets out the option for a petition for special election. And that code section also sets out what the requirements of that petition might need to look like and the signatures required. The city staff has undertaken some research and visiting with the elected, the folks of Polk County and Dallas County and the Secretary of State to ensure that we have the right information to conduct that election if needed. But yes, the 14 days would begin from the date of appointment. Again, assuming that's tonight, that deadline for the petition would be due on February 10th.
Okay, thank you very much. I noticed we've had some questions posted in the chat about confirming the actual cost of the election in both counties. Matt?
Thank you, Your Honor. Based on the estimates that we received from both Polk and Dallas County, because there would be expense on both sides, the estimate of 14,000 is accurate to the best of our knowledge.
Okay, thank you. Are there further discussions or anything else in the chat we missed?
Nothing in the chat that hasn't already been addressed, Your Honor.
All right.
Your
Thank you.
Honor, I'd just like to comment that in my view, I don't see a $14,000 cost as being prohibitive to when the will of the people would be that they want to ask us to have a special election. Personally, that wouldn't be a concern.
Again, it's right. Any citizen would have the ability to circulate a petition and request a special election.
I might also, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead, legal counsel.
I might also add the council, if they desire to have more public comment or time to consider the applicants from today, you may table the action item tonight till the next council meeting, as the city council has up to 60 days to make this appointment in case that was an alternative course of action to be considered.
I see we have someone. If you have a question, please come forward to the podium and indicate your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Sherry Marion. My address, you said?
For the record,
10536 Forest Avenue, Clive, of course. I was just wondering whether you all considered maybe the term is ending, maybe splitting up the time between the candidates to see how they actually work in the capacity. Is that an option to do? And then from that, you all will be able to see how they work and what they contribute to the city council. And then with the next term coming up, you can make your decision for maybe the permanent person coming on board.
Legal counsel has been hearing your question, so I'll turn it over to her. What we're doing tonight is appointing for the balance of the term, or
yes,
if within 14 days someone files a petition, then the person that was appointed would only serve until the results of the election, unless he or she were the one to win that election.
Oh, okay.
Legal
All right,
counsel,
thank
go
you.
ahead.
I think if I understand the inquiry, it is, could the council appoint, split up the term, with 2 appointments? And unfortunately, the Iowa Code does not allow that sort of approach, although it seems like a great idea.
Further questions or discussion on the matter? We do have a motion on the floor to appoint David Bell. That would require 3 affirmative votes in order to do so. If there's some other course of action, again, I think legal counsel indicated a motion to table would take precedent over the current motion if need be. But right now, the motion on the table is to vote for David Bell. Further discussion?
Just one comment. This happens more times than Weaver and I. I agree with Susan in this case that though I don't want to vote for a special election straight away, I'm good with the appointment process. I understand the petition and special election as well. And if that happens, it's $14,000 that we will spend And it's not a break the bank amount for something like that. Can the 14,000 be spent other places? Certainly. But this is the democracy, right? That we love and live in. And so we support it. And I too would sign it. I think every council member and mayor would sign that petition if that's what was happening. It's not something we would ban against, certainly. But all those things need to be in consideration for those that put their name in the hat. I suppose it could be anyone that didn't put their name in the hat tonight.
Anyone has the right
Right.
to, gather those signatures, and if 400 plus Clive residents want a special election, there'll be a special election.
That's right. So certainly that 14,000 isn't something we balk at. It's not something we just openly welcome, but it's not something I would balk at as personally to do a special election. So.
Well, the question before us
Yep.
is whether or not David Bell should be appointed or not.
Call
So
the question.
if the council would please vote. And then would the clerk please post that vote? Again, 3 affirmative votes are needed. What we have is 3 votes in favor and 1 against. So at this point, the appointment of David Bell is approved. What we'll do at this point is swear David in, and then we will take a recess. So David, if you would come forward. I need you to raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, David Bell, do solemnly swear
I, David Bell, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I shall support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the United States and the state of Iowa.
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge all the duties of the office of council member
discharge all the duties of the office of councilman
in the city of Clive,
in the city of Clive,
as now or hereinafter required by law.
as now or hereinafter required by law.
You're newly sworn in. Congratulations. We'll stand in recess for 5 minutes. We'll resume at 8:08.
I know, amazing, I know. Our life is fast.
How was, you still got more time to
I do, we're in the second phase of it now, we're working on our project, so. I think it ends in May. So yeah, I really enjoyed that program. It really opened my eyes. It's just a new area.
So.
I know. I think the baby is gonna be our like 4-year-old.
We'll resume after our recess. Now we're ready to look at the 22-23 budget, starting with trust and agency and general fund.
All right. I'll take this out of. Okay. All right. So tonight we have before you is the second part of the city manager's proposed budget. This is the second workshop really focused on the general fund and trust and agency fund. And so you can go a little bit higher. Oh, I think you're good. Yeah. We'll be starting off with the trust and agency fund and moving on to the general fund. We'll have a variety of folks talking tonight. Director of Administrative Service Elizabeth Hanson, as well as every director that's involved in the general fund budget. But up tonight. So what so what we're going to start off with is the financial strategies. Again, there's a lot of information on some of these slides. We won't necessarily be discussing each and every point. Of course, this was included in your packet for review prior to tonight. But these financial strategies really drive what you're seeing in this proposed budget. And there is some pieces to this that we've discussed in the past that are being utilized. What we're starting to see is some financial pressure, particularly in the general fund, with both on the expenditure side and the revenue side going forward. Most particularly, you're going to see some of the revenue challenges with decisions like from the Iowa legislature of eliminating the property tax backfill, what that causes us over a 7-year period and restricting some of our revenues, but also on the expenditure side, costs that are coming into play from a workforce standpoint going forward for the new markets that we operate in to try to attract the best talent here for the community is also coming into play. But these financial strategies hold true in terms of how we manage the different revenue sources and the funds that you will be discussing here tonight. And one of the main proposals is actually a shift of some levy authority from one of our funds that is in very good financial shape, our trust and agency fund, shifting that over to the general fund, still keeping the overall tax levy at 1014 for a 7th straight year. But again, utilizing some resources from one fund to the other. And we've done this in the past between trust and agency and the general fund. In fact, it was the opposite the last time. So I won't necessarily repeat, but one of the important things that you'll hear us refer to time and time again is the cash balances, the percents, where those sit at, what are the targets, the floor of 20%, the high end ceiling of 30%, that target of 25. Again, a lot of that comes from a discussion we'll have next week in terms of our bond rating agencies and how they focus on a lot of those cash balances. But with all that and with some of the financial challenges that we may have coming to us in the future, what this budget also does is still delivers on the strategic plan priorities that you've laid out for staff, those top and high priorities that you see identified on the screen, you will see incorporated in this budget that we're proposing to you tonight. And so that is a very key balance that we're trying to make, is understanding what the resources we have and making sure that it's meeting the requirements that and priorities you all have set last August in your strategic planning workshops. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth to talk a little bit about the trust and agency fund.
Good evening. My first little meeting here. So it's my pleasure to present the budget with you this evening. Trust and agency is a property tax that pays for the employee's health insurance, workers' compensation, the city's general liability insurance costs, and then the police pension costs as well. Also, the retiree health insurance costs are also included, and the reimbursement from employees. And when that's of course per the personnel manual that you have in place. Expenditure budgets were increased by 1.4%, as you can see on the slide, and the revenues will decrease over 1% due to the transfer of levy authority that Matt just talked about to the general fund. 5% is a projected increase in the health insurance for this budget, and 7.5% is the increase moving forward that we projected. And the wellness program, of course, has already been fully implemented. There's multiple long tenured retirements that were recently impacted, the retiree health insurance support. And we'll need to look closely at this fund. We'll have to monitor this closely As you know, there's some future deficits in the cash flows that you can see, but it's within our margins. The next slide is looking at fiscal year 21. Both the revenues and the expenses decreased. The original projection is 175,000 surplus, but the city actually ended up with $1.6 million. With surplus cash balance in the general fund grew 42.9%. It was originally expected at 29.7. So it's a very positive year with a very nice financial position, more revenue, less expenses, and of course, we handled the COVID-19 pandemic was the initial impact of that. So now looking at our current budget, we're looking at really both of those revenues and expenses increasing now. You can imagine that we're back to business as it relates to the COVID pandemic with normal service levels. That's increasing both, like I said, revenues and expenses. Looking now at this budget, the adopted budget showed $182,000 surplus. It's been revised to $969,000 using cash reserves. And that was due to the $1 million flood-prone property buyout program that you did transfer just recently. In 98% of your expenditures are realized, the deficit could be reduced by $449,000, and that cash balance would be approximately 34%. So if you looked at the 98%. So the general fund overview looking forward now. The full-time equivalent count went up 11% over the past 5 years. But really this budget's only asking for requesting one additional staff member. It's going to show $7.22 is the $7.22 is the levy generated over 60% of the revenue for the general fund, the primary revenue source. Transfer of 15 cents from trust and agency is what we're proposing. And next, we're going into the departments specifically. And I'll stay up for just one more slide here. So as you know, administrative services has transitioned personnel in the right positions over the last several years, which I very much appreciate. We have many short-term initiatives listed on the slide there for you. But there's only really one expense of $40,000 for a consultant to assist us with the employee recruitment and retention strategy, which is one of the goals that Matthew mentioned. It is on your list of goals for the year. I believe the next slide is for the police department. Chief Animal.
Evening, Mayor and Council. This year, as I outlined in my budget memo, it's going to be a relatively quiet year for the police department. In the last few years, you have made some significant investments in the police department. This year, we have very little that we are asking for new initiatives. First one is for Cellbrite software technology for our detectives to advance their abilities to cracking into cell phones with proper court orders. That is about $12,000 to get started and ongoing about $7,000 a year to increase our capabilities there. The second request is for the Brain Health Initiative for PD employees. That was piloted in the past by the fire department. The results have been very positive. So we want to expand that into our police employees. And that is expected to budget out at about $5,000 a year. For ongoing efforts in professionalism and fairness and accountability, our CALIA accreditation has gone a long ways to help our professionalism and our accountability. Ongoing costs on that are about $5,000 a year for our assessments from that organization. Capital equipment purchases, we will have again a fairly quiet year for that. We run a replacement cycle for all of our marked units and our detective and administrative vehicles. We will be replacing 2 marked patrol vehicles and 1 detective vehicle scheduled for FY23. If you don't have any other questions, or I guess at this point, I'll open up to questions if you have any.
At least you have enough in your budget for training aspects and as well, you guys are comfortable with all the-
Sure, we've maintained our levels of our training levels that we have in the past. We're fortunate enough being in the metro area, a lot of training comes to the metro area. We can get training without having to send people away. The big expenses come along when you've got hotel and travel. Additionally, with our beautiful new facility, we're really pushing to host trainings here and hopefully get some free or reduced price seats for our own officers in our own facility.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Who's up next? Fire?
All right, next up for fire. What we're working on, current trends, we've got 2 contract arrangements for fire services. One with Urbandale, one with West Des Moines with the West Side Station. So what we anticipate we'll see with Urbandale is as their population is expected to grow faster than ours in Dallas County, we expect our share of those expenses to trend down over the next years. With West Des Moines and the West Side Station, we're in the 5th year of renegotiating that arrangement to where it's a contract for service and they're essentially buying us out. So with that, we'll see a couple of things. One is they want kind of out of the fire inspection business. They're having difficulty getting them done on both sides of the street. So we're aware of that. So we expect in 2 years out to be considering looking at a part-time fire inspector. The other thing we think we'll see with the West Side Station is with the new location of the Clive station, we'll absorb some of the calls that they were running. So we think that, again, the share of expenses at that station will hopefully trend down over the next few years as well. With the Public Safety Center, luckily, most of those expenses are in Mike's budget, which he covered. There are a few things that are specific in ours, $5,000 a year for our station alerting system and a smaller expense for information sharing dashboard. On the 3rd bullet down with fire inspections, we talked about that. Employee recruitment and retention, Elizabeth hit on, as well as, right now we're going through finalizing the union negotiations that encompasses part of that. Paramedic training, we've had up to 6 people in paramedic training as part of our recruiting efforts to bring people in. So that expense this year in reimbursements is around $16,000. Foam replacement is an interesting expense. The foam that the fire service in general has used for years has recently been evaluated and declared that it's bad for people and bad for the environment. So 2 years ago, we put a moratorium on using it unless it's an emergency situation. So they have come out with new foams that don't have the forever chemicals that make them hazardous. So we've budgeted to replace that. We're waiting on Iowa DNR to come up with a plan to reclaim, take our bad foam away. Most states are moving to that kind of plan. So we're hoping Iowa DNR follows through on that. Public safety drone. We're looking to enhance drone that the police and fire department share. And we've already raised over half of that money through grants, through the Elks and through the Clive Chamber. So the total cost is $7,500 and we've raised $4,000 of that. Otherwise, we don't have any major capital expenses this year. And as I mentioned, the shared operational costs are under Mike's budget with the new building. Any questions?
Mike? Chief, that's an expensive drone. Will it have infrared or?
Yes, and
What constitutes that cost?
yeah, it will have infrared. If you'll remember with our little fireworks accident last year, was the one that came out from the sheriff's office was very useful for us to be able to mitigate that situation safely. So that's one of the major enhancements we're looking for.
I think it's a great tool. I just want to make sure you get the infrared
Mhm.
and the proper cameras. I mean, those things can be used for that. They can, search and rescue, search in
Yep.
in parks, and everything, but don't go cheap on the camera is what I'm requesting, right?
Yep,
Get it up in the air, you gotta be able to use it.
Yep, we worked collaboratively with the police department, inspect what we believe is needed to carry out our missions.
Do you have any advice for using it in a MRF or?
Yeah,
other-
don't use it inside a recycling recovery facility. There's a lot of magnets and although they're very hardy and will go through the entire system, but theoretically.
Is there a video of this?
Yeah,
All right.
sore subject. We got some great footage of how material is truly recycled.
Eric?
Chief, on that potential part-time fire inspector in the future, would that be used in conjunction or paid for service with West Des Moines as they're looking to phase that out? What do you foresee that program going and how do you see it folding out?
Right now, we've envisioned it as just using it to the capacity to handle the inspections that the West Side Station has done. Generally, that's 142nd to the interstate. So we just have to figure out from a time perspective what that would take. It could be a 8-hour day, 8-hour a week, 16-hour, 24-hour a week. It would depend on what that inspection load was.
No new vehicles. Look like you guys are good to go. Ambulance is good.
Yep.
Truck's good.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you for asking, though.
Sure.
You weren't getting it, but we just wanted to know if you needed it.
All right. Thank you.
Richard?
Before I get started, I just want to say we're very excited about the police fire drone as well, in case we lose a goat again. We think that'd be a useful tool for us. So, you just never know what's going to happen.
Coming on my side.
We're excited to kind of present what our proposals are and kind of what we see the trends for the Leisure Services Department. One thing I want to point out about our staffing, you see 5 part-time employees there, but that's really hours that are filled by anywhere from 15 to sometimes as many as 20 part-time librarians, assistant librarians, shelvers, and things like that. So I just want to, we have a larger team than that they just kind of fill in all those gaps of our schedule that allow us to do the service that we do. Key trends you're going to see with the proposals that we have for budget requests here are the increase in demands from the residents for leisure services facilities, as well as water resources facilities. More parks and trails are being added on, more responsibilities related to that. We're coming online at the end of the year with Circina Park. In the coming years, reinvestment in the parks and the Greenbelt are significant, and also to the increase in water resources facilities that will need ongoing operation and maintenance. A proposal for the fine-free library, seeing a trend in library services going to eliminating fines from overdue materials and actually increasing the amount of people that use those facilities and make them more popular places. And then finally, we'll go into this a lot more depth.
Let's hold on that the fine food right there, because that caught my eye as well.
Yeah.
So this is, and where did that come from? From a current other libraries, common practice you're seeing more?
Yeah, you want me to, I'll just jump to that slide because we got a slide just strictly for that. Yeah, so what this is it's a growing trend in libraries and finding that actually fines have become less effective at actually getting people to return the materials. A lot of times what people are seeing is they might be embarrassed that they might have lost a book or damaged a book. So rather than admitting that and paying for it, they kind of just disappear and then they don't come back. We have over 1,470 patrons that cannot use our library right now that had a library card because they have a fine of $5 or more. Would they all come back? Probably not. Right now, we have almost 800 items that actually are over 30 days due. And we really see that once we hit 30 days overdue that we don't get them back.
We'd still want to keep some fines on larger things, like, so we have kind of almost like a tool lending library for crafts, like a Cricut machine, some other things like that. We do think that fines would need to stay on that, as well as like our hotspots, just because of the higher dollar value on those type of things. It's a fairly small in the overall library budget. Reduction in revenue of about $15,000 is what we get from the fines that we have now in an average year. We think that we could reduce some of that impact through book sales and reaching out and finding grants. Additionally, ways that one of the questions as staff, we kind of started to talk about this is, well, would we just, people keep those materials? Would they never come back? There's ways to handle that. And kind of one of the kind of outlines we'd look at that is that if your materials are 7 days overdue, your library privileges would be suspended. No fines are occurring. Once you bring the materials back in, then it would privileges be reinstated. If you lost the item, it was damaged or never came back, again, you'd have to pay for that item, as well as a $5 restocking fee. So we feel like it's a balance between encouraging more people to come in, but not discouraging them with small fines. That's kind of the intention behind the proposal.
Interested in seeing after a year how that program went as far as the reevaluation process. Is it
Yeah.
working, is it not?
Yeah, so the only thing we have to go on is research that's been done in larger systems. There's some big systems that have done it. Chicago library system has had it in effect for about 2 years now. They actually saw an increase on circulation by about 60% in library materials. New York City library system just implemented it about 6 months ago. So it's kind of out on that. And then more and more libraries around the Des Moines metro are starting to do that. Des Moines, Grimes, Altoona, and a few others are looking at it as well.
Your Honor, I have a quick question.
Yes.
How do you account for interlibrary loans or those that have a hold placed? Is
Mhm.
there a way to encourage having those items come in so that, you know, we can keep it moving?
Yeah, we'll do everything we can on that to find a way to get that. Sometimes we're kind of at the mercy of some of those interlibrary loans, getting those materials back on what their library policies are. But certainly we think that it could be an overall net benefit for circulation here, hopefully keeping more of the materials actually within the library itself and not having so many, like I said, we have nearly 800 right now that are over 30 days overdue out of our collection.
I like it. I just know those are 2 times
Yeah.
where there's kind of a pressure to
Mhm.
get it back in.
And certainly one of the things we could do, should the council want to move forward with this, is evaluate it after 6 months to a year to determine how well it's doing. How many library materials do we have out? How many people returned? All those type of things. We could certainly put some metrics in place on that.
It'd be interesting data to share, because upfront, I'm skeptical as well. My eyebrows raised. But when you explain it, because I believe you have to have a stick,
Mhm.
right? But your stick is, you're frozen after 7 days. I'm good with that. Why do we rack up 10 cents a day for, whatever?
And we had really lengthy discussions as staff before we even approached it with the library board, and the library board discussed it in depth at several meetings. And, that was one of the biggest, stick ups of bringing something forward like this to the council is, what's that risk there on that? And we feel like that's a nice balance with that and getting more people and using those materials, but not creating more risk for the city.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes, please do, Ted.
I forgot he was here.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Really did.
I'm still here. Yeah, I'm skeptical on this, Richard. I feel like we're encouraging bad behavior, to be honest. And why would we not just, instead of, $5 seems like a really low threshold. Why wouldn't we just raise that to call it $20 or what have you? It seems like if there's no, as Mike put it, no stick, then we're kind of encouraging bad behavior. I don't know. I'm struggling with this one.
Absolutely. These are all discussions that we've had, and the best information we can have is from what other libraries have done across the country. And it's, like I said, it's a fairly relatively new phenomenon, but so far the trends that those libraries are at least putting out from their data are positive. That actually increases circulation, reduces that loss of materials, and creates a more robust system of people coming in and out of the facility.
What about the current overdue fines out there?
So, there's a lot of fines out there that the city probably will never recover, just because people disappearing. Every year we have that kind of write-off for that. The hope is that if something like this was approved, what we would do is putting together some sort of amnesty program where if you bring the materials back, we would write off X number of fines, maybe put in a reading program to hey, if you got kids' materials out, come in for 4 story times and we'll waive this many fines, to try to find a way to get as much of those materials back and re-engage as many of those people as possible in the library.
What are the current fines out there?
A total?
Say, for example, you've got a wife or son that didn't bring their stuff back on time and you had $2.85. Theoretically, what would happen in a situation like that?
Well, what we would probably do is we would put together some sort of amnesty program to the library board, and then we would bring it forward to the council on how you wanted to handle that.
Or another councilman is willing to pay $2.85, not have you go in front of the board, theoretically.
Theoretically.
So Richard, I'm assuming
I might owe.
we have plenty of past year stats and trend lines for this type of information, so that if we were to implement this type of program, you would be able to show us, okay, here's what happened over the last 5 or 10 years, and here's what's happened during the life of this program. Is that an accurate, you're prepared to provide that?
You're talking in terms of circulation and patron accounts?
Well, in terms of how this would impact us, yeah. So, I mean, whatever those metrics are, the appropriate metrics for measuring the success of this program, we have those metrics in place today so that we have something to compare it against. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, we could absolutely do that.
Okay, so because where I'm at with this is the only way I could support something like this is if we did it in some sort of pilot, like a 6-month pilot. Let's see how it works. If we have evidence that it works, great, I'm all for it. But I'm skeptical going in, so I would want to see that data.
Kind of the same.
One thing
Are the Weaver boys not jumping off the bridge anymore? You know, that kind of thing.
The one thing I will mention with this, particularly because it is actual formal policy change that would have to be made. So yes, we're talking about this in the budget process, but you all would still have to approve the actual policy. It would come, and the library board has already discussed it. And so it would come forward to you for a formal policy adoption where we can make sure all those details are outlined, metrics are established. And so we want to talk about, because of the financial impact, obviously we're talking about it in the budget process, but before it would be implemented, and we could set, if the council wants to set that kind of 6-month or 12-month pilot timeframe, we can do that as a part of that policy. But this would actually have to be a policy you all would approve before implementation. It wouldn't be just the budget approval authorizing it. There would be another policy step there.
Well, I'm reminded that you actually did have a kind of a test period during COVID when fines were suspended. And so it's my guess that some of what has prompted bringing this forward, it must have worked pretty well. I'm not objecting to considering it on a trial basis again, but it's actually been tried.
All right. I'll jump back here to the first page here. So, and then finally, the last current trend is we're really excited about the opportunity and what we've learned so far and how we would like to be able to execute doing the experimental programming out at Linehan Park and the Diamond facility. You can see under our significant budget requests, the first 3 relate to replacement of equipment that was next in line as part of our kind of 10-year replacement plan for all our equipment and vehicles. One thing I would note, the toolcat is actually something that was originally on a 10-year replacement, but we have found that we use that piece of equipment so much that we actually had to bump that up to probably about a 7-year replacement. So this represents 7 years because we're starting to see just the overall failure of that piece of equipment to the point that we're having a lot of downtime with it and having a lot of repairs with that. So we think that it's probably a better adjustment scale on that. The next few really relate to continued investment in the park system. Walnut Ridge, it's time for tennis courts. One of the things we will do on this is work with the neighborhood surrounding it to see, do they still want that to be a tennis court? Do they want that maybe to be some pickleball courts or maybe a half basketball court? So we'll work with the neighborhood on that. Continued implementation.
That was my question on Walnut Ridge. Is that right over there, right off Clark on Elmcrest? Is that Walnut Ridge right there?
Yep.
So that, that was my question. Is I would talk to neighborhood first, right? Are they still using it? The other half is that you get a lot of water that comes off that retention wall right there too. So what's the best purpose of that?
Mhm.
Is it a tennis court? Is it pickleball? Is it a basketball court?
Yep.
Let's definitely pull that neighborhood and find out what they want in there.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the things we're hoping to do, maybe once the weather gets nice out here, hold some sort of neighborhood kind of gathering out there and ask them those questions because, pickleball is so popular. You could do 2 pickleball and a half basketball court on the existing tennis court site, or we could continue to remain tennis. So there's a lot of options out there that we can do with that, and we're excited to engage with the neighborhood on that. A continued implementation of the signage plan. We just about wrapped up the neighborhood park signs, but there's several more in that plan that was done by the city, more wayfinding signage to direct people along the trail system and other signage across the city with the parks and the trails. The aquatic center replacements, this is the first year of the 5-year plan that we put together to reinvest in that aquatic center to make sure that it stays a stable and strong facility. $32,000 will help us get us some of our pumps, the HVAC, and some controllers replaced this year. Grant writing and fundraising. What's that?
Before you move on from that,
Yeah.
I read about that in your memo here. Do we have a copy of that 5-year maintenance plan? Have we seen that?
What's that?
I don't recall it. So could I just ask that we get a copy of that so we can look through it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll send it out to you.
Okay, yeah, because it wasn't in the memo or any of the other stuff that I saw.
Yeah, that makes some sense. Yeah, so we just put the first year in here, but yeah, we've got all 5 years, and
Yeah,
a lot of it's just painting and other things, but we'll get those details out to you.
Yeah,
Any
that's fine. I
details
just
on
like to see it.
slides, anything of that nature as far as major capital equipment for the aquatic center?
The biggest thing that we are looking at potentially is replacing some of the valves that relate to the leisure pool. Some of those little spray features there, some of the valves have started to break down to the point where they don't always operate the way they're supposed to. They still function, but we need to look at replacing that. And I think that was probably the largest item in there, about $45,000. Most of it is just the ongoing, making sure that all our pumps are in good working order, UV systems, all those things that just kind of go sight unseen in the pool to make it operate well.
Last time we brought this pumps and all that up, and I don't want to hold you back from what you need to do, but I was intrigued by an idea of the solar on the roof of those units. And the reason we couldn't change over to solar was because of the pumps. And is this something we start righting the ship now that can run off DC or whatever it might be, whatever the reason was years ago why we couldn't do it?
Yes, we will be evaluating the ability for solar on the roof there because the roof will have to be replaced some point in the next 5 years. So what's one of the things Matt and I have already talked about is, what is the ability of that to happen and how would that maybe work? Because we don't need all that much electricity there most of the year. We need a lot 3 months out of the year. So what would happen to that the rest of the time? So there's some things that we'll need to investigate as we do that, but it's on the list before we re-roof it.
I believe it had to do with the pumps before. So if you, start looking at those, but you're right, you can store that electricity all year and carry it over from year to year. And then dip into it when at the peaks. So
yep, absolutely something we're looking at. And then last two on here before we jump back into the Lynn Ann and Diamond, grant writing and fundraising support. This is to assist with the Greenbelt Landing as well as the other triad projects, as well as continued park and trail investments across the community in the next few years. $30,000 annually here. $5,000 of that would be to help with the Great Outdoors Foundation for the fundraising and helping us kind of get those things right. And then the rest would be grant writing for about 10 to 15 grants per year. We believe that this is something that is, if we get one grant, which we'll easily get one grant, that it more than pays for himself. And then finally, the addition of an operations specialist to handle the new stormwater facilities they have and will continue to come on board, as well as the new park facilities.
Hey, Richard, on the grant writing thing, so is that a contract service or is that an employee that we're hiring or paying, or how does that work?
So it would be a contract service, and it wouldn't probably be with just one service. What we try to do is work with different grant writers that have expertise in the different types of grants. So we might approach an engineering firm to help us write grants for the DOT, federal rec trails and state rec trails and DNR type grants, where we might reach out to a more general grant writer on some of the ones that are less technical. So it's just really going to depend, and we want to make sure we can get the most out of that money.
Fair enough. So, and when you say annually, is that indefinitely? Is that annually for the next 3 years, or what does that mean?
I think the hope would be that over the life of the triad projects, but certainly it's something we can evaluate each year to see where we're at with all the projects and whether or not there's still a need for grants on a lot of these different projects.
And I think there's always going to be a need because we have a lot of projects moving forward and we're developing. Now, I'd like to just look at that on a yearly basis. Look, if it's a great investment for the city and it's paying for itself on numerous grants, that's great. But I don't want to fund that on an annual basis just to fund it.
Absolutely.
I'd like to see that metrics for where we stand on that on a yearly basis.
Yeah, what we can do is just include in my budget memo every year what the previous year grants were written and dollars received.
Great.
All right, so we'll jump over to the Linean Park and the Diamond. So one of the want to is kind of give you the process that we've gone through to this point to really understand what we think, how we want to start with this experimental program. So we just, as a team, wanted to kind of get a feel for the neighborhood. You've seen this graphic before from the plan that Doug's team has been working on for the neighborhood there, but there's about 2,500 people that live within a 10-minute walk of that park. And we went up to Crestview and they have over 30 languages that are spoken within that school, and 65% of the students there are from diverse backgrounds now. So a very diverse population that lives very close to Linean and frequents it quite a bit. As we started talking to a lot of people, this is kind of what we heard. Obviously, this is a very big summary, but really kind of give you a feel on what we're starting to hear out there. We heard a lot of people say that it needs to be a welcoming, inclusive environment in order to attract people to want to come there. We also need to be very flexible with constantly changing demographics out there. Well, one of the examples that the principal at Crestview gave us was that there's been quite a big Chin population within the neighborhood for a while now. She said they're actually starting to see that population move farther north into Urbandale, and they were being replaced with a lot of people from Central America. So Ecuadorians, South Americans, all sorts of people from Central and South America. So seeing that those demographics are changing, we just got to be flexible with what we're putting on or how we approach different people. Before and after school program is badly needed. Library services would be important. Few can get to the existing library here because they don't have a lot of transportation options. We saw a lot of requests for elderly programming, talk to Polk County, senior services, food, games, just socialization. Talked about, classes. I think David talked about that in his interview. Are there ways, to offer classes like that? One of the things that we've started here related to that was English language learner workforce classes in specific kind of areas would be useful. And then just opportunities for socialization of all ages, kids, teens, adults, and seniors. So with that, that's kind of what you have here is what we're kind of proposing on how this experimental programming and services would work. We would set some sort of hours out there where we would be open each week. Right now, I put up here Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 to 7 p.m. and Saturday from 8 to 12. Those aren't set in stone, but it's kind of give you a feel on what we'd be looking at. We'd also have rentals and programming partnerships where we allow people to use the facility outside of that. Some examples might be working with CamPlay to maybe offer some sports or activities or leadership classes in the community room. Kick It Forward, continue that partnership that we started with the mini pitch. They would look at maybe possibly doing some clinics and camps within the apparatus bay. Also looking at the police administration side as maybe an area for a small library branch with a specific children's area, study room, a small makerspace area, and seating areas. The apparatus bay is essentially the same as a gym. It's great opportunities for recreation, community space, rentals, partnerships. And then finally, I think we could use the fire administration for recreation and community space, potentially additional rentals as well as partnership opportunities, looking at game areas. Maybe there's an area to do e-gaming with different game systems in there as well. So a lot of great spaces in there to do some very cool experimental stuff.
I'll stop you there only because you got me to remember something. Sorry, Chief, but I suppose this is the fire as well. But just driving that area now, you do see the void of police cars, right, and the fire trucks and that kind of. You do notice it, and so maybe if we can get that. A feel back in your programming that has an officer down there or firefighter down there, right? In some of these programming pieces, it'd be good for the neighborhood to see that. Because you always saw it on shifts and you'd see cars all the time, and firefighters walking across. So just as long as we can get that little feel back.
Yeah, we've actually, one of the things we've done, we've started connected with the SRO and talked about, are there ways to maybe do some of that programming with them, finding ways to engage them as well. So not just a leisure services thing, but multiple different departments.
Yeah.
The diagram you have here is just kind of a rough idea, give you a feel on how we might use the space. We're proposing to use the main floor only, as well as the apparatus bay. At this time, we wouldn't need the additional space in the basement just because A, it's a little bit more separated, and B, it's broken up into a lot of different offices. So right now, we probably just use that for storage for this experimental purposes. But you can see here the pink on the right side, the old police administration area would be great for some library, shelves, chairs, seating, and some study rooms, a computer area. The community room, as well as the apparatus bay in green, and then orange in the fire administration area would be great for some different specific recreational uses. Our proposed budget for this is $150,000 between essentially now and the end of the fiscal year 23. $70,000 of that would be in the current fiscal year for facility changes, improvements, and purchases. So this would be the painting of rooms to clean up a little bit. This would be purchasing some shelves for libraries, purchasing library books, purchasing equipment for games in the apparatus bay, maybe some soccer goals or some portable pickleball nets. $20,000 in current fiscal year would be for programming costs. The staff time needed to do that, any materials for those programming. And then finally, $60,000 in fiscal year 23 for programming costs and staff time to get us from July 1st of 2022 to June 30th, 2023. At the same time, we think that we could bring in about $10,000 in revenue through program fees, room rentals, and potential sponsorships. We've already had some initial discussions with like Shields, and they're very interested in providing us maybe some of the athletic equipment that could be used in the apparatus base. So I think there's a lot of opportunities with existing relationships that our team has that could be really helpful in regards to that. From a proposed timeline standpoint, so right now we're here tonight kind of getting direction from you on the proposed programming plan. Should you give us the direction to move forward, we're looking at most of February would be beginning to modify the building, getting it cleaned up, getting it painted, getting any purchases that we need to do, then trying to find part-time library and recreation staff with the hope that, in March, we start to do some limited hours there, some programming in the building and offer the community room for rentals. In April, we hope that we could get the branch library open for the first checkouts and have regular hours, kind of something like I talked about in the previous slide. And then finally, in August, we would have our first check-in with the council on the evaluation of where we're going and what we're seeing from that standpoint. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I think we had some online input, Pete.
It was only a comment from a resident who was asking for a professional sort of position in mind where she advocates for older adults, that is the preferred term as opposed to elderly when we are talking about these services.
So a question too that I'd had on senior center, we talked a little bit about that in conjunction with Polk County. Anything more coming out of that? Where do we stand with that? Is there still potential for collaboration in the future?
Yeah, I think absolutely. They've, we had a great initial meeting with them, kind of talking about what services they are, what kind of need they think they see within Clive, how many Clive residents go to, the centers in West Des Moines or Urbandale, some of those areas. And so once we kind of get the go ahead, what we'll do is we'll reach back out to them and find ways to continue that collaboration and find ways to work with them.
Where would they put it in your current plan?
What we've kind of talked about in that orange area would be a great spot to potentially put some tables in place there, potentially have some snacks, games, socialization opportunities is kind of what we're thinking at that point.
Hey, Richard,
Yeah.
on the small library branch and the expenditures required for that. So just to be clear, I totally support the idea of a library branch over in that area. I've said it for a long time. I guess my concern is we still don't know what Diamond's going to be long term. And I just want to make sure we're not spending money that on something that's going to be taken away later and then we can't reuse. So is the money that we would spend to create this branch now, are the materials and whatever we've do to create this is that reusable in the future, kind of irrespective of what happens to Diamond.
Yes, they could either be reused, books could be incorporated into our collection here at the library. The shelving that we would purchase could be sold. There's a lot of opportunities to engage and get rid of that stuff in a way that we wouldn't lose a lot of money. We actually found a really great deal for library shelving, as well as a book drop, as well as a couple book carts from Des Moines Public that we were able to figure out, get about $17,000 worth of stuff for $450. So we're doing everything we can to find great deals and things like that to really reduce the costs, so that should this be something that doesn't move forward in the future, that we're not out a lot.
As long as it's not sunk costs, right? Because I mean, I totally want a library branch over there. I think it's one of the best things we could do. I just don't want us to sink a lot of costs that we can't recoup.
I would say the main things that we would lose at this point are paint. That's probably the biggest cost of something that, if this facility didn't move forward as a public facility, is paint. Most everything else could either be sold or kept in some other manner.
I'm okay with that. And I agree with Ted's point. I think we need to be able to pivot based upon demand right there. We just don't want to get locked into something where it's a major expense to get back out of.
Absolutely. And some of the things we've been doing too, as we lead our current collection, the library staff has been keeping a lot of books that we think would be valuable over there. So we already are starting to build a collection that we'll be able to take over there without having to purchase additional books. As we get donations, we evaluate them to see if they would be valuable to keep in that collection. So we have quite a few books already that we've been kind of saving that would have available for that already.
May I ask a question as well?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking in that area, this could be something that could really bring the community together. Has there been any conversation in regards to getting the local support of the people to help volunteer, maybe even to, like you mentioned, paint? Just the idea of, earlier somebody had mentioned the idea of $25. Hey, that helps something, and now they have a little bit of buy-in. But somebody says, hey, I can spend 4 hours helping to paint the place that my children are going to go looking at books at. It may be something that could help actually bring people in and get that community involvement that we are desperately lacking in that area. Has that been a conversation point?
Yeah, absolutely. We're absolutely looking at that. We're starting to see maybe some of those partner organizations that are willing to come in and volunteer some time to help clean it up. Finding ways, the hope is that we can start to maybe engage some kind of key individuals within that community that could really help be catalyst for us to start to get those relationships built, so we can start to build that. But 100%, we're absolutely on board on trying to find ways to do that.
Richard, that's going to be one of the keys, those local stakeholders stepping up, taking an active role, whether it's a volunteer, assisting in painting or whatever it is. Donations, what have you. There's lots of different areas, but engagement of local stakeholders and the local clientele there.
Absolutely. That's one of the things we were kind of most worried about, is like, how do we get people to show up here? And all the people we've talked to, they said, have some music, maybe have a movie, and have a potluck, and just invite everyone in and start to build those relationships. And so then we can start to identify who maybe some of those key people are, that we can start to build additional relationships to really grow that.
Since you mentioned the different cultural mixes in that area, getting each one to be able to influence a little bit. Hey, this is a little bit of our culture right here.
Yep.
That could be very powerful.
Yeah, I think, the possibilities are endless. And one of the things, beyond kind of saying how we want to use this space, we're intentionally actually trying not to be too prescriptive on what maybe some of the programming might be until we get people in there and start talking to them a little bit more. And so, from that experimental standpoint, then we start to say, all right, what about this? Would you like something like this or this? And start to kind of, start talking to all those different people and say, hey, what would be valuable here? What works? What doesn't work? It's, it's been some interesting discussions we had as staff, because, there's always a little bit of fear. You don't want to put something on that no one's going to show up for. And in this case, that's okay. If it doesn't work, let's pivot next week and try something else. So, it's a lot of been kind of talking. We've talked to a lot of those immigrant and refugee groups about, like, do you have a use in this neighborhood for some space, or what would bring people to a facility like that? And so really starting to have a lot of those discussions that hopefully will be very fruitful as this programming evolves.
A reminder to the council too, we've had some very fruitful engagements with Crestview School of Inquiry students and their teachers. So it was just last year that we were working closely with their entire class of students working on ideas for Lannan Park. This is a similar type of engagement opportunity that might be very fruitful if we went back directly to the students.
Absolutely. And the principal said that we could do that,
Mhm.
that, you know, once we start to get some of these ideas, we can absolutely go up there and talk to the kids and get even more ideas.
This will also be one of the proposed focus areas for the community survey that we put out later this spring. The special section this year that we'll be proposing, if the council is agreeable to it, will be these types of new services that could be provided in the Diamond Center or around the Diamond Center as well.
And maybe let's keep it, I like it. And I say, you know, East Siders will band together, right? We'll get her done. But let's let that be kind of our focal point for pool shuttles, right? That if you can get to the Diamond Center this spring, summer, maybe we can get you to the pool in a 15-person van that you might not be selling instead of just keeping for transport. But anyways, as hard as it is to get to the library, it's just as hard to get to the aquatic center.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things we actually have already started to reach out to DART regarding that from the aquatic center kind of scholarship discussion. So their planning team is going to take a look at it and see about the possibilities of that. But we've also talked about that as well. You know, could we run a shuttle a few times a day with that 15-passenger van back and forth between City Hall, the aquatic center, and the library and over to Lynn again. So we're definitely investigating a lot of those opportunities as possibilities.
Thank you.
Anything else, Richard? If not, I think Doug got that.
Keep this one pretty short for you. Not a lot of change between what's happened this year. Staying busy with development, continuing to work on our district plans for the east side, as well as continuing the efforts along University Boulevard, our university. And then spending still quite a bit of time putting together the project associated with the flood buyout areas. So pretty consistent with what you've seen in the past in terms of the budget request, status quo and on the operation side. Do have one request this year to look at the deployment of software to allow us to become a little more efficient with the permitting process and offer a little better service to the residents that are obtaining the permits themselves. We do see a path to cover the cost associated with that. So through our user fees, we would anticipate being able to not have that project be directly impacting on the general fund itself. We are also pursuing a grant from FEMA. And if we are successful, that will reduce that first year capital cost for that project by approximately 75%. We'll know more about that in about a month's time. Happy to answer any questions you might have on that particular project or anything else that we're working on.
Any questions, Michael?
So regardless if you recoup it in the money and the permits, I mean, you're going to recoup it in just time, people hours, right? I mean, that's just the one that you'll get either way.
Yes, it is. You're absolutely correct. I put this in front of you from the standpoint of the dollars and cents, but absolutely, we anticipate that simply the exercise of working through the workflows that are needed to then produce the product will result in substantial efficiencies, we believe.
Doug, on the flood property buyouts there in University, where are you guys on thoughts of what we're going to do with those properties and next steps? What's your thoughts on that?
Sure. You know, as we talked during the capital improvement plan, we do feel the need to have some kind of incremental reinvestment in that area, both in terms of the property physically as well as programmatically. We are still scheduled within the strategic planning to have some discussions around that later on this spring and into summer. And as you might recall, our phase 3 acquisitions, our goal is to have those acquired and the properties demolished by the end of the year. So the planning for kind of the incremental use would occur this year with potentially some implementation or reuse of those spaces starting next year.
Thank you.
Ed?
No, I just feel bad for Doug that he's not getting enough mic time tonight. I'm sure he feels lonely.
All right, now it's back to me, but before I take over here, I'm going to have Dennis Harkin, who I know is on the Zoom here, our Technology Services Manager, talk a little bit about, again, the City Manager's Office. We have the Tech Services Division and some work, a lot of work that they've been doing in the last 12 months related to our new data center and some redundancies, and then some other items that I want him to discuss about that service area. Dennis?
Sure. I couldn't be with you tonight, Mayor and Council, but we're lucky that we have technology like this, that we are able to share this out with our public and our staff when they're not able to be on site. Wanted to just kind of work through, highlight a couple of things with the bullet points there under the technology part. As you know, the business continuity and disaster recovery and cybersecurity are all top priorities in the tech services department. We continue pretty regular communications with the staff about cybersecurity. We continue regular training on recognizing email phishing scams. We also, a couple of years back, we invested in better email filtering, which catches well over 90% of those things that come through, antivirus type filtering and all that. In your budget memo, you'll notice on the general fund capital expenditures, I think we're going to start trending a little flatter there, which is good from a budget standpoint. And kind of going about talking about a little bit about the new data center. This is going to be a new fantastic asset for the city. Over the next several months and maybe into a couple of years, we'll start to migrate and consolidate some of the other city technology resources into the new data center. That includes the interconnections of the fiber between the facilities, which for the most part all go to City Hall right now. And we also want to start transitioning some of the traffic communications infrastructure into that new building. So we would relocate the traffic firewall and some of the traffic servers and stuff into that new data center. As far as the actual budget part, those first two items there regarding infrastructure and computers and copiers, this next year, we're probably a little less on the computer side because we were only replacing computers in one department. So we'll kind of balance that out with the infrastructure side and kind of get in some much needed network replacements on some older hardware going forward. We can do a little catch up there. As far as the actual operating budget, we're probably seeing a little higher maintenance costs with adding the redundant ISP connection that we have over at the new public safety building. We still maintain the connection at City Hall as well. We're going to be looking at some services here to do monitoring of both those connections. So if one of them goes down, traffic can be rerouted through either or connection as far as the staff getting access back into resources within the city network when they're off site. And then we're also looking to try to do a promotion here in the next year. And if Matt and Pete have a little bit more information, they can share on that as well. And I'm open to any questions you might have.
Yeah, that's the promotional position and the senior network administrator, James, who you're all familiar with. Boy, especially in the last year, has really shown just an ability to do things at a very high level. And we understand that that's also a very competitive environment that we're operating in the IT space. And we want to recognize his advancements that he's made in his position, and really think that needs to be recognized in the budget as well. And that is something that we're proposing. And I, as you'll see in the my recommendations is something that is high on my list. So I wanted to offer that and then see if council has any comments on tech services or city manager's office in general. One thing I will say too, and it was kind of mentioned briefly or on the slide, on the staffing slide, is the discussion about communications capacity that we've had, particularly strategic planning last August. Still on the radar for me in future years that I want to bring back to this council, likely for discussion again in August, but it's not included in this proposed budget, but something that I definitely want to bring back to you for further consideration, as we definitely see the demands are there. And I know we've talked about that quite a bit with Pete's comments related to kind of our communications and engagement strategy, and a lot of the conversation we heard tonight through the interview process with the prospective council members. So again, wanted to offer that and be happy to answer any questions on the city manager's office.
Any questions? Yes, Eric.
Dennis, can you give us an update on cybersecurity and ongoing efforts to initiate that program and what we're doing moving forward?
Sure. I know one of the things kind of got pushed back a little bit. We had you all adopt the new cyber incident plan mid last year. The management team still needs to just kind of go walk through the document again, just as kind of a reminder of steps that we need to do if we would happen to have an event. The second part of that is that we're going to start scheduling some training with each of the departments to implement some pieces of the new technology policy that we adopted also mid-year. And the biggest part of that is going to be recognizing email scams, those types of things, as well as coming up with a better password policy and making those passwords stronger. We're going to be implementing in some of our online resources that we're already using now. We're going to start implementing some two-factor authentication on some of those. So we are going to just continue to build on having better cybersecurity. We've got things in place now that we can start using with the staff, start training with the staff. So it is something that we'll continue to do. We're not going to just go status quo. We're going to keep striving to be better.
Okay,
Thank you.
I had a quick question for Dennis, if that's allowed.
Up to the council.
go ahead.
Come on up to the
Come
mic.
forward so it can be picked up on the mic, please, Shrikant.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask real quick if Dennis, if your plan included any sort of mobile device management or end user device management in your plan, or if that's already in place.
The computers and laptops that we have now do have some end user management on them. We use a couple of different packages on all those endpoints, including the servers. We still have a little ways to go as far as like the mobile cell devices and the iPads. And we do continue to evaluate what's available to protect those endpoints.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
One thing I'd add to what Dennis has shared is that all of us who sit up here in the front of the room as well have a key role to play in this. And so Dennis and I will be engaging with each of you individually to talk about some ways that we can continue to create a secure experience for all of you with the devices that you choose to use when you're conducting your official business.
One thing we're doing too, from a Wi-Fi standpoint in the new facility, the new public safety facility, and I know Dennis looks forward to replicating that and other facilities in terms of our Wi-Fi network, is you can no longer connect. So there's basically two Wi-Fi networks in the new public safety building. One is kind of the staff network secure side, and one is just a public side. So, you know, one of the key things that we have, particularly in the public safety building where you have a lot of staff, is the personal devices. So we don't allow personal devices to connect to the secure side. They can only connect to the public side. So those are some changes that we're trying to make too, to better secure our network, because of course you have a lot of demands on both sides of the Wi-Fi. But also from a staff efficiency standpoint I know I've appreciated it when I've gone over there with my laptop is you can instantly log into our network and get to the files that you want to do from a city device that has those endpoint protections that Dennis was talking about. So the general fund for this proposed budget. So revenue increases. Property tax, we continue to grow as a community. One key thing on this slide that I wanted to point out is you see our assessed value increase of over 8%, but our taxable value increase of about half of that. Why is that? The residential rollback actually dropped larger than was anticipated across the state of Iowa. So as you can see there, dropped a little over 2 percentage points. So what that means is our residential tax base, what's allowed to be taxed as a percentage decreased a little over 2% in the last year. So that has been a significant change. And then we also continue to see rollback or taxable valuation accessible to taxation decrease on multifamily properties. You can see the stats there, and that will drop significantly in the next year. That will actually drop all the way down to the residential number as a part of the 2013 property tax legislation that the state of Iowa passed, the Iowa legislature. Of that approximate 800,000 increase in revenue and property tax, about a third of that is just from that transfer of levy authority that I was talking about. As we saw, looked at the trust and agency fund in good shape, and the general fund, as you see in the long-term projections, is in very much need of resources and other considerations going forward. Again, I felt that that's going to be appropriate for us. And that was part of the reason we do the long-term financial planning and build up cash reserves, is to have the flexibility to move these resources where the city needs it the most. The other big revenue jump was discussed at the last council meeting in terms of the change in the solid waste recycling fees in terms of the 1320 to the 1505. The one thing to note is there's a revenue loss baked into that, is we historically had charged an admin fee on our solid waste, and staff were proposing to eliminate that fee to make sure we're staying competitive with the other Metro Waste communities that are going to have that same 1505 rate. If we maintained that, it would be 1605. And we didn't, from a staff perspective, what I'm proposing to you, didn't feel that would be appropriate if we're kind of looking at the competitiveness across those other Metro Waste communities. So that has an impact of about 82,000 a year that we lose in revenue that would have been on top of that. Again, we're starting to see more stable revenues coming back, hotel, motel, rec, as we're rec and aquatics, as we're getting hopefully out of this pandemic and have kind of a more normal activity level.
Before you move into expenditures, I've been asked to give a short recess, so we'll do that just for 3 minutes.
Okay.
We'll be in recess for the next 3 minutes. So,
all right.
Everybody get up and stretch.
Yeah, this is a long one tonight, so I apologize.
people to hear what kind of impact that.
All right, I'll take it back over when you're ready.
So many waivers.
Yeah.
You got it?
Yep, we're good.
Yeah.
We ready, Matthew? Back from our resets. Take it away, Matt.
All right, so still on revenues, moving on to, I won't progress forward.
Real quick, Matt, what's that 15 cents change? What does that impact trust and agency? How will that impact trust and agency?
So it's about a $250,000 shift. But as you can see with the cash flows that were provided, we're still maintaining a positive, projecting a positive balance. So the key with that is we had a really good renewal year. That 5% is actual. It's actually going to probably be less than that. So the trust, the healthcare maintenance trust that we're a part of, so we have gotten that number, so we locked that into the budget. But as we talk about a lot with healthcare and health insurance, is there's a lot of unknowns out there, particularly coming out of the pandemic. So we're still showing those 7.5% projected increases in health insurance premiums going forward. I still feel we need to keep that for now. But even with that, as you can see, we still have long-term positive, because again, as we'll talk about a number of times, we budget for 100%, but we very rarely spend to that level as a very fiscally conservative organization. And so we're going to see positives there. And so there might be opportunities in the future for further shifting. I just felt at this point in time, the 15 cents was about all we were comfortable with. See how that goes. Maybe if we're still seeing some good benefits and the trust and agency fund and the general fund has needs, there could be some further shifting we do in future years.
Thank you.
Okay. Back here. All right. There we go. Helps when you share the screen. All right, back to it. And for some reason I accidentally restarted it, so. Yeah. We'll get there real fast. All right, so revenues. So I talked about the revenue increases that are included in the budget. So significant revenue decreases. So as we discussed last year, the thing that we've been talking about every year came to fruition. The backfill has gone away. It will be phased out over 7 years with a total loss of just in the general fund alone, $370,000 during that time period. Over all the funds, if you added it all together over a 7-year period, it's about $3.5-ish million that the city is going to lose out on over a 7-year period that the state of Iowa has eliminated. Also, what's happened in terms of another revenue decrease is, so there's 50% of the Dallas County local option sales tax for property tax relief is used to fund a portion of our arrangement with the city of Urbandale for Station 43 for the fire and EMS services for the Dallas County portion of our community. Of course, they can also go to any part of Clive, but it's really focused on that service area of our Dallas County portions of both of our communities. With the population shifts and the 2020 census, Clive grew in Dallas County, but we didn't grow as fast as some others, like Waukee, for example. So if you recall, that formula works, 75% of it is population based. If our population wasn't growing as fast as a Waukee or an Urbandale or a West Des Moines in Dallas County, we actually see a little bit less revenue. Now we'll make that up over time as the overall Dallas County local option sales tax receipts are growing over time, but there's a little bit of hit here with that census readjustment, if you will, in the population numbers. Overall, what we're proposing in this budget, revenues are going up a little over 4%, approximately 900,000 in revenue. And then the transfers in line is where you see that hit on the Dallas County lost funds.
So does that mean population grew in other communities, so they're taking a higher percentage?
Yeah, they grew faster than us, particularly Waukee and West Des Moines grew faster than us. So we still grew. That was our main growing area. We just didn't grow as fast as the others.
Dragging us down.
So on the expenditure side, we have a unique year this year. It's the 27th payroll. So we're a biweekly payroll city. And about every 11 years, you're going to hit a 27th payroll, and it happens to be this year. And so about half of our increase in expenditures on personnel expenses is that one time, that you have on the 27th payroll. And so what you see in the projections that are for the general fund summary is that it's actually stays pretty much level from the proposed budget year to the next year. That's basically showing you the difference of that 27th payroll, because of course we have those kind of roll up in payroll that goes up every year, but we'll basically bake that in already in the second year because of that 27th payroll. We are higher on the inflation side and CPI numbers of the pay scales for non-union. And of course, as we are in union negotiations right now, we're also seeing that pressure in terms of our competitiveness in our fire and police positions. And so that's going to start to be represented in the budgets going forward to maintain our competitiveness and workforce in this metro area. What we also have is, again, a new public safety facility that we're operating and still maintaining the Diamond Center with the proposal that you heard earlier tonight of having the experimental programming. We're going to still heat it, cool it. Now, we're not going to do it to the level that it was when it was a 24/7 operation with a public safety with a public safety staff in there, but we're still going to have expenses. We still have, HVAC equipment to do preventative maintenance on. So there's still going to be those expenses. And also we did do some projecting of what the expenses will be for the new public safety center. We had that baked into the projections last year, but of course you don't get everything included. And so now we're realizing all of those full expenses for a full year. So that's another piece to this. I always note the collaborative public safety programs, as the chiefs talked about previously. Again, not a huge increase there, but I just always like to note those every year. So overall, expenditures are increasing slightly faster than revenues. And that's where you see the gap occurring in the budget this year. So in terms of our financial position, you see that what we were projecting last year for this budget year was about 36,000 use of cash reserves. We're projecting about 371,000 this year. Now, if you take a very conservative approach of just only expending 99% of those budgeted numbers, we'd be as low as 145,000 use of cash reserves. Now, what I'll say is the last fiscal year that we closed out, the 2021 year, was kind of an anomaly here because of COVID. Our expenditures were only 91% of our budget, and that's because a lot of shifting and a lot of we cut back on a lot of part-time part-time staff that were delivering programs that we couldn't deliver during COVID. So we had a huge drop in expenses. We usually average a little closer to the 97, 96, 98%. And so even if we hit those marks, even if we hit 98%, it wouldn't even be a use of cash reserves for this budgeted year. We would even have. So even though I'm showing the use of cash reserves in the projections, I wouldn't hopefully overreact to that. I think there's still an opportunity for us to have a positive year, maybe hopefully adding to the surplus. But this is going to be, our general fund is getting tighter now because of some of those pressures that I talked about on both the revenue side and the expenditure side. So this is why we talk about this every year, show the long-term projections and build up the cash reserves that you have in the general fund, is to manage this incrementally over time. Because as you can see with this proposed budget, we're still almost hitting nearly 30%, that ceiling number of percent of cash balance. So we're likely going to be there, hopefully even higher than that. And then you've got opportunities to manage some of these challenges going forward in future years. But this is a little different conversation than we had a year ago. Again, we had a lot of things change in a year. This is just a little bit more detail on the kind of the levy equivalent and expenditure equivalent of that backfill loss. And Liz has put together a table here that kind of shows you that 7-year phase out of the, it was about a little over $500,000 in a full year that we had from the backfill that will go away. Also, a piece of legislation from 2019 in terms of the 2% transparency threshold. Of course, we're over that growth rate in our property tax fund with about 4.6% in our taxable valuation growth. What I'm offering to you today is we're a high growth community. And that I would offer that we definitely need to take advantage of that because we've got some challenging times coming. And to take that full 4.6%. And I'm just wanted to show you here what some of those impacts are if we restricted it back to just the 2% revenue growth. Again, that is the action that I'll be asking you all to take after this, is just to set the public hearing for that maximum tax levy public hearing that would occur the second meeting in February. And then following that, then you would set the budget public hearing for March. I know that's in the next steps that are coming up here.
Super majority, right?
It needs a super majority for that to pass, correct? Just the February vote.
Correct.
And then the budget is a simple majority. My recommendation to you, again, I talked about it a few times tonight, maintaining that existing tax rate of 1014 for a 7th year in a row. And you can kind of see where we sit in terms of the current tax rates. Of course, I don't know what the proposed rates will be for all these communities because they're going through the same process we are. But this is, so Ankeny took a jump down below us with some reductions in their levy rate. I always put my little star on there for Urbandale because the sanitary sewer levy that is charged in their community isn't included in that 1011. But there's definitely been a lot of shifting in a couple of these rates from over the years. And if you want to know any specific ones, I've got the notes here from what changed from last year to the current year. Of all the cities listed here, even with the shift in the 15 cents of the trust and agency levy to the general fund, we would have the second lowest general fund tax rate. Ankeny was the only one below us. Just that general fund levy portion of the rate. Yeah, and I've kind of talked about it throughout, so I won't necessarily repeat it in terms of, this budget that's being proposed to you is managing the resources to meet the goals of the community and the priorities that you've all set in the strategic plan. Again, we focused on a few tonight, particularly the Diamond program, Diamond and Lenan programming, and how we can do that. This budget is laying that out to how we can deliver on those priorities that you've set. One thing we always talk about is, okay, what's the cost overall to everything that we've talked about in these two workshops, to the Clive taxpayer. Again, we include this every year in terms of showing what those changes are from current year to proposed. Now, this is keeping a house value at the same value. So that's at the 318,000 in terms of, and we reevaluate that every couple of years to see whether that's an accurate kind of median house value number for Clive. But if you keep the house value the same, which we all know we had some reassessments in terms of some of those property values going up. But if you kept it the same, because the rollback is going down, it actually results in a negative in terms of savings on the property tax side. Again, assuming the property stayed at the same value, which is probably not the case in a lot of places. I know, for example, even just my own home, the appreciation of my assessed value is actually offset by the rollback, so it's flat. So it's zero, it's no change essentially. And that average is widely different across the community. But again, this is a kind of an apples to apples comparison from one fiscal year to the next. So this includes all the utility rate changes that we talked about at the last work session, and then holding the levy rate that we're talking about tonight. Also taking a look at, if you look at cost to the taxpayer across the metro area, where does Clive rank? This shows you both for a residential property and a commercial property. So but what this does not incorporate for all those other communities is any utility rate changes that they may be looking at that I don't know what they are today, and any property tax changes that they may be looking at. But this does incorporate the rate changes and the holding of the tax levy that we have been talking about in these workshops.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you putting this chart together. It's really nice to see. Every year we talk about what you just said, that, okay, this is our current rate. I don't know what the other communities are going to be at, but this is how we compare currently today. And it bakes in our increased rates, like with stormwater and sewer and water, but doesn't necessarily bake in the other communities because we don't know it yet, right?
Right.
So once we do know it, it would be nice if you could update this and send this back out to us so that we can see once all the other communities have updated their rates.
We can 100% do that. And I can also show you a version of this too, of if you took at all the current rates of today. So for example, if you took all the current utility rates on the residential side, we would probably be higher than West, we'd be lower than West Des Moines. Because it's about a $40 difference, and that's baking in our utility rate increases. But yeah, we can definitely update that for current numbers after we get those at the other cities complete their budgets and have them certified to the state.
I think that'd be useful.
Yep.
Last night on the Central Iowa Taxpayers Association meeting, Bondurant mentioned that they're dropping their rates, and I'd be interested maybe in starting to include Bondurant on this list just because they're growing so fast. I
Sure.
just kind of like to keep tabs on what's happening there.
We can do that.
That's a great point, Susan.
Yep, we can do that. So that completes the presentation tonight. Again, what I'm looking for from you all at this point is direction, questions. You feel like this is hitting the mark on your expectations for the general fund and the trust and agency fund in terms of what's presented to you. Of course, we had talked a lot about the other pieces at the last work session. We're moving those things forward unless, any other changes in direction. We've got some items to follow up on with you based on some of the questions tonight on some specifics, the Fine Free Library piece and a couple others that we'll be sharing more information with you. But that completes our my proposed budget presentation to you, and want to thank all the departments for the hard work that they do to put a lot of this information together, and then also doing their jobs to really manage their budgets and the resources that you all entrust in us to deliver the services for this city.
Any questions for Matt? Otherwise, I'd entertain a resolution.
I do have a quick
Yes,
comment.
go ahead, Susan.
I'm sorry. I just would want to say, I do think that the direction is good, that it's really helpful to see kind of an idea of what the larger costs will be within each department. I feel like it's relatively lean because I'm thinking, in the near term, we may start to see some opportunities present themselves for development, acquisition, things maybe connected with the interchange redesign that will happen. And we're not very well positioned to take advantage of that if it does present itself. So I'm not suggesting that we get less lean, but I just like to point out that we have some limitations for ourselves too, and we should be thinking ahead.
Eric?
Yeah, I thought it was overall very good, and I think you've hit on all the council priorities we've had as far as our strategic planning and, what our points of interest are right here. It's difficult budgeting times, and we're mixing and matching a little bit, doing what we need to do to keep the levy where it is and yet satisfy, all the wants out there. So good job. And I think we're on the right track.
And one thing I want to offer too, from a staff perspective, and I think this will be something we'll discuss later in the year, is there's going to be some scenarios and options. I know it's still a few years out when you look at the cash flow projections, but some things that we're going to want to talk with council about, both on the revenue and the expenditure side. Opportunities, potential collaborations that may have some financial benefits that we want to evaluate, but it's going to come with choices in terms of service level choices and things that we need to talk about and positioning. And so don't want to kind of share that tonight until we get it more fully involved, but there's some things that we'll be talking about, strategic planning and otherwise, that we at least want to put on your radar now before we get to the point of if, depending on where things shift. Because also we have the legislature currently in session, and who knows what might happen as well. There was a tax proposal put out there today that could drastically impact our local option sales tax. And so those are things, words like backfill are being thrown around again, that a state will backfill revenues that they'll take away. So we've heard that story before, and it was only 12 months ago where we saw what happened. So again, we try to be flexible and build in some capacities here to deal with those kinds of pivoting, but we'll try to see what the next 3 months-ish hold, and be ready at strategic planning to talk about, some of these financial items that we'll need to address going forward.
Ted?
Well, I'd just like to say that I want to commend our department heads and directors. I think they've just done an outstanding job with their individual budgets. And I read through every memo very carefully, and I just think they've done a great job with their individual budgets. And so I just want to make sure that they get the proper kudos for that. So with that, I moved a resolution setting the public hearing for February 24th.
Second from McCoy. Further discussion? Not. Would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post the vote?
Councilmember Bell, you have an option whether or not you would choose to vote for it or abstain. We can do it a voice vote, however you'd want to do it.
I was gonna say, it looks like I have to do a voice vote.
Okay.
I need to
Yes,
do a
no, or
voice vote
abstain.
as well. I'm out of the system, so I vote yes.
I vote yes as well.
And will the clerk please post that vote? And so that resolution setting the public hearing passes by a vote of 5-0. All right, next item, correspondence. Anything, Matthew?
Everything was in your packet.
Thank you very much. Pete?
Quickly, Scott Turkson was on the call tonight. He wanted everybody to know that he was happy to see everybody up here doing well as we get going into January. The Harbach folks, as they were leaving, expressed great appreciation for how much listening and attentiveness you demonstrated to all of them. So thank you. That was also very helpful to staff. Excellent media coverage this week. We have had 3 stories already, and we'll get another one tomorrow because we're putting out a press release about our new council member, which we're excited to do. And then talking about the process that you all went through tonight to make that selection. The other stories were about our new mayor and some of the priorities that Mayor Edwards has for the city looking ahead, about the opportunities with the Clive Fire Department. Chief Garcia did a great job talking about the new facility and opportunities with the Clive Department. And then today our partners at DMAC, which includes a couple of leaders in their program around EMS services, who also happen to be former full-time and current part-time staff with the fire department for one of those people. They had a wonderful press conference there that was very well attended. So tonight and tomorrow, you'll probably see quite a few clips with a fantastic Clive fire truck in the background, people talking about great careers for all folks, whether you're at the start of your working life or your mid-career, wonderful opportunities in the fire and EMS services right now. We hope people will strongly consider Clive. Building on what Matt said, very interesting times in the state legislature. Please, if you would, continue to follow what's going on there closely, because we're talking about potentials now that would drastically change the types of conversations that we just had now.
Thank you,
That's all I
Pete.
have, Your Honor.
Ted?
Mercifully, nothing tonight.
Thank you. Eric?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Susan?
I just would say that the Polk County Homeless Coordinating Council met today, and I agreed to join in a kind of a study committee to look at basically gaps in the homeless system, especially how many people are in want of a place to go in cold weather.
Thanks, Susan. Michael?
I have one thing, just on Metro Waste Authority. Today, we met with, and believe we hired 8 Afghan refugees from the replacement, or from that relocation program. Sharp individuals, and it's looking at another 3 to 4 coming on next week. So
out of MERV?
Yep, at the recycling
Awesome.
facility. So it was, yeah, it was great.
Good. Thank you. Council? You're good?
Clear, thank you.
Very good. Matt?
All I have, Your Honor, is we'll be getting with Councilmember Bell and doing some orientating, and then I would, as a part of that program too, and we'll share that around as opportunities for each of you to connect with him and talk about, some of the, maybe the logistical mechanic things that you learn as a council member when you're up here doing votes and all the rules. Would appreciate time that you can provide to him, and we'll be getting him with staff on a variety of items here over the next couple of weeks. And it'll be, as I told him, we'll be drinking from a fire hose for a little bit here. I was in the middle of the budget process, but we'll get him there.
Thank you. Anything else? Would anyone like to stay further this evening? If not, we'll stand adjourned at 9:50. Thank you all.
I'd like to say that the
Everyone.
last
This will